Chapter 5471. I think the best method is to first ferret out that mysterious hall master in the city and, Arbor made a beheading motion as her chilly eyes stared icily at Emolien. Hubby, are you confident? Emolien twitched his mouth and frantically nodded, replying without any moral integrity, Don't worry, wifey. Leave this matter to hubby. Hubby will definitely dispose of that damn mysterious hall master as soon as he finds him. Arbor nodded with a frosty expression and muttered to herself, See if they still dare to cause trouble for me. Killing their most capable hall master would be the icing on the cake for their plot to develop the imperial providence. Reporting to your highness the crown prince and crown princess, his majesty is summoning you to Benevolence Hall for a chat. Arbor was taken aback and glanced at her husband. Royal father wants to discuss matters with you again? Could it be that the situation in the kingdom of Qing was becoming increasingly urgent? Who knew how Duanyu was doing? Arbor's eyes flickered. However, Emolien raised his brow, feeling that his old father seemed to be here to stir up trouble. Could it be that he wanted to stir up trouble again because he was having a good life? The young couple packed up and boarded the carriage. When they arrived at Benevolence Hall, they were welcomed inside. Not only was the emperor present, but Her Majesty the Empress was also sitting next to him. Her Majesty the Empress's eyes involuntarily brightened when she saw the two enter hand in hand. The more she looked at this pair of children, the more she liked them. However, the emperor asked sullenly, Do you know why father called you here? He really wanted to teach these two a lesson. Last time, a state security incident actually caused him to be in a complete mess and unable to eat or sleep in peace. It was simply infuriating. The only thing that the emperor rejoiced about right now was that his youngest brother, the old prince of Giant Pain, had gone crazy from the seizures earlier and pulled his son into seclusion with him. Being locked up at home for so many days actually freaking saved him a lot of trouble. Otherwise, based on the crown prince's previous temper of disliking anyone he saw and disliking everyone, wouldn't he make an example out of the old prince of Giant Pain? At that time he would definitely have a headache. Wouldn't that old King Giant Pain be crying his heart out in his palace? Fortunately, the old King Giant Pain was tactful enough to close himself off. When the great emperor thought of this, he could not help but sigh in relief. He felt that he should take back the words that he had said to his youngest brother, Stupid coward, unable to be educated. Arbor didn't know why the great emperor asked them to come. She just glanced around and saw old concubine Su, who was crying silently. His heart stirred inexplicably, vaguely feeling that he had guessed something. Emolien gently grasped her hand, and he also glanced at Grand Consort Su. What business does Imperial Father have with us? The great emperor sat on the main seat and wanted to put on airs in front of the couple. Unexpectedly, his foot was gently kicked by the empress. He couldn't help but feel depressed. Old concubine Su said that just now at the gate of the city, the crown princess fought with the people of Suha. The situation was out of control. Is it true? It can't be, right? This old lady must have nothing better to do. She had yet to diss Su Hugua and become the lackey of Tian Yun and his group. At this moment she actually accused her in front of the great emperor? If the old lady didn't know how to behave, then don't blame Sir Jojo for dissing her. Imperial Father. Emolien spoke first. I don't know if you know that there is a transformed person of Tian Yun in the team of Suha's maids. This person used to be the holy nun of the Sun Moon Temple. When she was in Shuntian Prefecture, she repeatedly plotted against me and the crown princess. Chapter 5472. Oh. When the emperor heard the crown prince's words, he turned his head to look at Grand Consort Su, who was sitting on pins and needles. What is Grand Consort Su's explanation? You also know that the current situation in our divine province is tense, and we are irreconcilable with the Heavenly Fate Empire. If Grand Consort Su's maternal family is implicated with the Heavenly Fate Empire, the emperor purposely paused at this point and glanced faintly at Grand Consort Su. This made Grand Consort Su increasingly unable to sit still. She hastily stood up and said, Your Majesty, you mustn't listen to the Crown Prince's one-sided remarks. I can guarantee that Su Hugua has absolutely no connection with the Heavenly Fate Empire. What you said is too fake. The little stoic rudely interrupted him. You've already unearthed Nye Yaoguang in your team. It's hard to guarantee that you won't unearth several more Ho Yaoguang, Wang Yaoguang, and Sun Yaoguang tomorrow, right? Grand Consort Su was so angry that her entire body quivered, and she hastily shook her head in denial. No, it's not like that. There's no dispute about this matter. A chuckling voice was heard from the roof. Arbor looked up, and his eyes involuntarily brightened. Second Ant Master? Second Ant Master Yang Shirong was currently squatting on the eaves of the main hall without a proper appearance. She held a wine pot in one hand and a cup in the other. She laughed as she drank. My little disciple. Yang Shirong's sudden appearance startled the emperor and his entourage. Many royal guards even dashed in from outside the hall with nervous expressions while wielding sabers and swords. Someone actually secretly squatted on the wooden beam of Furen Hall without them noticing at all. It was evident that the newcomer's cultivation was more than just a little bit higher than everyone's combined. Yang Shirong jumped down from the beam with a smile and cupped her hands at the emperor. Holy water sects Yang Shirong greets your majesty. The emperor had an amiable expression and waved his hand to dismiss the royal guards outside the hall. He said with a smile, Holy water sect's second peak master, we have long heard of your great name. May I know what peak master Yang meant by your words just now? Yang Shirong cracked a smile and took out a jade image talisman from her pocket and tossed it into the air. I was passing by and accidentally recorded everything that happened. Your majesty can take a look. In any case, there was no proof. Now that there was everything on the jade talisman, the whole process was clear. If his majesty saw it personally, it would be clear who was right and who was wrong. After carefully watching the process recorded in the image talisman, the emperor and the empress both turned to look at old concubine Su, who was slightly pale. Old imperial concubine, this is your fault. You were clearly present at that time and already knew that her family was colluding with Tian Yun. Why are you trying to argue with the crown princess in front of us? The empress frowned and said coldly, Princess Suhugwa's personal maidservant is a person blessed by the heavens. Now she has been imprisoned by the crown princess. This matter is true. What else is there to refute? That's not the case, your majesty. Old concubine Su felt bitter in her mouth and stammered to explain, our Suhegwo has nothing to do with destiny. This maid, you say that she's someone chosen by the heavenly fate. What proof do you have? Just because she disguised herself and used a transformation talisman, could it be that you can falsely accuse her of being a person of destiny? The emperor waved his hand and directly interrupted old concubine Su's words. He said coldly, Old imperial concubine, don't pester endlessly. Come, invite old imperial concubine back to the palace. In the following month, please stay in your palace and recuperate. Don't come out to talk nonsense again. Chapter 5473. Let me go. Let me go. Old concubine Su couldn't help screaming. The emperor actually wanted to put her in confinement? What was the difference between this and confining her for a month? The most terrible thing was that whether she had a chance to come out after a month depended on the emperor's mood. Now she had some regrets in her heart. If she had known this, she wouldn't have gotten involved in Su Yi's mess. Now she was in trouble. Su Yi was also in trouble. The emperor also spoke harshly to her. It seemed that he was going to punish her severely. Old concubine Su felt cold all over. When she was carried out, her legs couldn't help trembling slightly. However, as soon as she walked out of the gate of Foreign Hall, she heard endless screams. In the square in front of Foreign Hall, several eunuchs and palace maids seemed to be haunted by ghosts. They stumbled and rolled a few times, exclaiming several times. Old concubine Su was startled, and the two eunuchs who forcibly supported her to drag her out also stopped. The three of them stopped on the steps in front of Foreign Hall. At the same time, the guards in the palace heard the exclamation and rushed here quickly. Old concubine Su didn't understand what was going on. When she saw the thing climbing up the stairs, she couldn't help but widen her eyes. Was it? Nye Yaoguang. Old concubine Su's cheeks twisted fiercely. She stared at the strange thing that climbed up the stairs with all four limbs in disbelief. There was a pair of black antennae on its head. It looked like two spider legs covered with a layer of very fine fluff. Old concubine Su gasped and couldn't help but take a step back. The two eunuchs who supported her were also frightened and hurriedly stepped back. When they saw that the strange thing was climbing faster and faster, it almost kept climbing in the direction of old concubine Su. The two eunuchs were so scared that their faces turned pale. They hurriedly let go of old concubine Su's hands and ran into Foreign Hall. His Majesty and the Empress had come out when they heard the scream. The two eunuchs didn't dare to be rash. They stopped and knelt on the ground. They pressed their heads tightly and didn't even dare to raise their heads. Bai Wuxia glanced at them and walked out of the gate of Foreign Hall by them. Looking at the source of the sound, she saw old concubine Su fell on the stairs. Half of her waist hurt. She waved her hands in panic. Nye Yaoguang quickly crawled in front of her and laid there ready to attack. His scarlet eyes stared at her coldly. Old concubine Su probably used all her strength to restrain herself from screaming in front of old concubine Su. Arbor followed him out of the Furin hall. Seeing the scene in front of him, he couldn't help but smile. Bringing the mutated Nye Yaoguang into the palace and letting Nye Yaoguang find a chance to escape from Furin Palace was done according to her plan. She wanted this Yaoguang saintess to know one thing clearly. Little glutinous dumpling, what's that? The emperor glanced at the couple suspiciously. Why do I feel like this was deliberately arranged by someone? How could such a monster appear in the palace so openly like this? The emperor could almost be sure that this must be done by the black-hearted couple. The emperor stole a glance at his expressionless daughter-in-law and coughed softly. Glutinous dumpling, what do you think about this matter now? The emperor was also aggrieved. He didn't dare to ask more and could only ask tentatively. Chapter 5474. Old concubine Su was lying on the steps in front of Furin Hall. She was scared by the monster and fainted directly. He couldn't let old concubine Su lie straight on the cold stone floor and ignore her all the time, right? It was too much of an eyesore. A faint cold light flashed through Arbor's eyes and he said with a light expression, "How does father want to deal with it? I don't know if father has found it." Nye Yaoguang still insisted on coming to find old concubine Su after turning into a zombie. Obviously, she has a deep impression of old concubine Su. Maybe there are some secrets between them. Old concubine Su woke up faintly and thought that she had been moved back to her bedroom. However, when she opened her eyes, she still saw Nye Yaoguang lying in front of her. When she heard the little crown princess's words, she almost fainted again. She held her chest with difficulty and steadied her breath. However, when she saw Nye Yaoguang's distorted face, old concubine Su was so anxious that she leaned back and hit her head on the steps with a bang. She was in so much pain that she burst into tears and cried sadly, "Your Majesty, Your Majesty! Save me, Your Majesty! Where are they? Where are they? Come on, take this thing away, take it away." Her lips trembled and her hands couldn't help but tremble. At this time, old concubine Su should have been hit by 10,000 points of mental attack, and her whole body trembled uncontrollably. Nye Yaoguang's appearance was really terrible. Her lips were blue and purple, her facial features were distorted, and there were 2 black tentacles sticking out of her head. At a glance, she didn't look like a human being. To be honest, she was even more disgusting than the zombie that could walk and jump. Everyone liked the zombie and then looked at this thing, and they really felt that it was very unpleasant to the eyes. She looks a bit like a demonic cultivator with poisonous spiders in her body? Emolien whispered to Arbor. "Jojo, analyze it for me." Xiao Mu had an analytical expression on her face as she said with certainty, "It must be that after the mutation failed, it turned into this inhuman and ghostly appearance. Very few people can achieve a perfect transformation." Sir Jojo snorted. When he thought of Wei Su, his expression turned cold again. Just like young Master Wei, the mutation can be considered perfect. No matter how she changes. Arbor took a few steps forward and walked down the stairs. This Nye Yaoguang was courting death. He was definitely going to die today. Arbor walked to old Princess Su. At this time, the old concubine was scared out of her wits, and her nerves were almost in a mess. When she saw Arbor coming over, she hurriedly reached out to grab her leg. Arbor unceremoniously kicked her hand away and scolded, "Get lost, you're in the way." Old concubine Su rolled down more than 10 floors along the stairs and rolled to the platform in a panic. Fortunately, they were wearing thick winter clothes. She rolled all the way down, but it wasn't a big deal. However, when she thought about how she, the dignified consort dowager, had actually been kicked by that damn girl and had rolled down the steps in such a humiliating manner in public, she choked back a mouthful of old blood in her heart and felt very depressed. Arbor didn't even look at old concubine Su from the corner of his eyes. He walked to Nye Yaoguang and stared at her from the corner of his eyes. His eyes were filled with hidden hatred, and a touch of coldness appeared on his lips. "I originally wanted to keep you for a few days." Arbor's gaze fell on her coldly and he said faintly, "Unfortunately, you're too ignorant and tactful. Trash will always be trash. No matter how much medicine you take to mutate, no matter how much shortcuts you take, you're still trash." Chapter 5475. Nye Yaoguang, I, the Crown Princess, want you to understand this principle. Arbor looked coldly at Nye Yaoguang, who kept twisting her body on the ground, as if she wanted to create sparks from the friction. Her posture was unusually twisted, and her 4 claws scratched the ground fiercely. She looked like she was ready to attack. Her eyes stared straight at Arbor with unconcealable hatred. Arbor glanced at her coldly. I'll give you a chance to fight with me. As long as you can survive 3 moves from me, I'll let you go. From then on, we'll bury the hatchet and never find trouble with you again." The group of Imperial Palace guards who had heard the news were all gathered at the bottom of the stairs. When they heard the little crown princess's words, they couldn't help but look at each other. Compared to the secret guards who always followed the crown princess, these Imperial Palace guards usually only met the crown prince and the crown princess face to face. Although they had heard that the crown princess was extremely powerful, they had never seen it with their own eyes. Therefore, when they heard the crown princess's words, they couldn't help but feel worried. If Her Highness the Crown Prince Consort was injured in the process of fighting with Nie Yaoguang under their protection, the ones who would be punished in the end would definitely be this group of unlucky fellows. If even a strand of hair on the young Crown Prince Consort's head was harmed, given the degree to which His Highness the Crown Prince doted on her, they would probably be in deep trouble. When he thought of this, the leader of the Imperial Palace Guards couldn't help but sigh. He was afraid that today's matter would be difficult. Seeing their Crown Prince standing on the stairs with a smile on his face and an expression that said, "My Crown Princess is always right," it was a little unbearable to look at. Arbor leaped down and landed on the flat ground below. Nie Yaoguang's head suddenly rotated 360 degrees. She swung her limbs in the opposite direction and climbed down the stairs. Bai Wuxiao was shocked by her terrifying appearance. His eyes couldn't help but widen. He said in a low voice, "Can all the bones in her body be reversed?" Just now, Nie Yaoguang's head had suddenly turned in a big circle. His feet were in front and his hands were behind him. The way he crawled quickly had really frightened her and made her break out in a cold sweat. Just looking at it was enough to make one's hair stand on end. It could only be said that a daughter-in-law who dared to fight against such a thing had a very strong mental fortitude. The Empress felt that if she looked at such a strange-looking thing, she would feel uncomfortable. However, she did not expect her daughter-in-law to be able to hold her own. The two of them exchanged blows in an instant. The ferrule in Xiao Mu's hand slapped over his head without any mercy at all. The ruler landed squarely on Nie Yaoguang's head. The scene of Nie Yaoguang's head being smashed into smithereens did not happen. After being hit by the ruler, she was still very proud. She raised her head and grinned provocatively at Arbor. "Didn't you say that you could defeat me in 3 moves? Look, now your ruler is like scratching an itch for me. It doesn't hurt at all. Just looks mighty." That was the meaning behind her provocative gaze. Xiao Mu merely glanced at her before promptly retracting her gaze. The second ruler landed on Nie Yaoguang's head at a faster speed with a trace of fiery light. This movement was so big that everyone couldn't help but widen their eyes in shock. Chapter 5476. Even old concubine Su, who was lying on the side and shivering, couldn't help but tremble and shrink her neck subconsciously because of her earth-shattering strike. When they looked up again, everyone couldn't help but twitch their mouths. They saw that the mutated thing was still lying there, and there was no damage on its head at all. She even grinned provocatively at Arbor, as if mocking her for being a pretty girl and not being able to hurt her at all. In fact, although Nie Yaoguang had become very ugly, she still had some intelligence and memory at this time. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been so hostile to Arbor. She was very happy now. At first, Arbor was bragging, which really made her nervous. She said that she would kill her in 3 moves. These words were all lies from that scumbag Arbor. She knew it. She had already been modified and mutated, and her survivability had long been stronger than ordinary people. Although she was a 3rd-level mutated waste, she had also gone through 3 mutations. Her body couldn't be as unchanged as before. She had long been made into a body of copper skin and iron bones that couldn't be broken. Arbor wanted to use such a small ruler to smash her head. Ah, what a fool's dream. The more Nie Yaoguang thought about it, the more excited she became. Her face was distorted as she raised her head at Arbor. Her 2 antennae swayed back and forth on the top of her head, expressing her joy. Arbor looked at her expressionlessly for a long time and suddenly raised the ruler in her hand. Nie Yaoguang put away her nervousness and looked at her with disdain. This small broken ruler couldn't break her head once or twice. Could it be that she could go to heaven for the 3rd time? It was said that the first drum was strong, the second was weak, and the third was exhausted. Arbor's 3rd attack was definitely not as good as the first 2. Nie Yaoguang didn't care about Arbor's ruler at all. Until that oppressive flame suddenly spread out from the ferrule. A trace of black flame ignited the remaining strands of Nie Yaoguang's hair and suddenly burned her neck and face. With a loud bang, Arbor's strike broke Nie Yaoguang's neck. Everyone only heard a kacha sound. He looked back in horror and saw that half of Nie Yaoguang's neck was crooked. His head was swaying slightly as if it was hanging from a bamboo pole. Old concubine Su, who was close at hand, turned back and vomited. She was scared out of her wits, her body trembling back and forth. Suddenly she rolled her eyes and fell hard on the stone floor. This time he fainted from fright and completely fainted. Arbor looked back at the grand concubine and looked down at his hand in confusion. The ferrule in her hand glowed faintly, and the black holy flames revolved around her fingers obediently. The old lady was too easily frightened. She was just joking with them, who knew that their tolerance would be so poor. Speaking of which, she didn't do it on purpose. Before the fight, she had already reminded Nie Yaoguang that she could defeat her in 3 moves. Why didn't she believe it? Xiao Mu shook her head and indifferently stared at a certain thing that had collapsed to the ground with a plop, its limbs twitching continuously. A black crystal rolled out of Nie Yaoguang's head. It was the size of a thumb. It was one of the few large crystal cores she had seen so far. Chapter 5477. What made Arbor feel a bit strange was that Nie Yaoguang's crystal core had clearly fallen out of her head. However, she hadn't completely stopped breathing. Her hands and feet were twitching non-stop, as if she wanted to take something out of her bosom. Under the Crown Prince's signal, 2 hidden guards stepped forward and kicked Nie Yaoguang down the stairs. Nie Yaoguang rolled down the stairs and fell beside Grand Concubine Su with a bang. Grand Concubine Su was slowly waking up. She saw Nie Yaoguang's round eyes sticking to her left hand. She immediately cried out in alarm and fell backward, her head bumping into the stairs. Bai Wuxia's mouth twitched, and he hastily directed the dumbfounded royal maids at the side. "What are you staring blankly for? Didn't you see that Grand Concubine Su has fainted several times? Quickly help her up and send her back to her bedchamber. Isn't it good for her to stay in her bedchamber and enjoy life at her age? Why did she always like to come out and cause trouble?" The emperor watched this scene expressionlessly. When he saw the little crown princess shove that crystal core to the crown prince, he was truly speechless. He lowered his head to look at Nie Yaoguang, who had fallen on the jasper stone platform. He saw her take out a crumpled item from her bosom with great effort. Why did it look a bit like a sealed letter? Ridiculous, this mutated monster was about to die, but she actually took out a letter from that pile of rags? It wouldn't be believable if someone didn't purposely give it to her. The 2 hidden guards rudely kicked Nie Yaoguang, who was moving mechanically, again. This kick was very powerful and directly kicked Nie Yaoguang's head off her neck. Arbor was speechless and silently glanced at the 2 hidden guards. The 2 walked forward and used the tips of their swords to move the crumpled letter on the ground. They turned the letter over and saw a line of words written in the middle of the envelope, "To Arbor only." The 2 immediately looked at each other and turned to look at the little stoic crown princess. "Crown princess, this letter is for you." Emolien's eyes turned slightly cold as she said faintly, "What a dirty thing. I don't even know if it's contaminated with corpse poison. Jojo, I'm not watching." Xiao Mu nodded with a docile and obedient expression. "It's burned." Emolien grasped her small hand and turned around to leave this place. However, as if he had suddenly sensed something, he suddenly turned around. He saw that the letter that was burned by the secret guard was wrapped in a ball of flame and flew up 1/2 meter into the air. At the moment when the flames were burning, a cold and handsome face suddenly appeared in the flames. Just like that, he stared at them coldly, his eyes devoid of any signs of life. "The holy wood fragment and a wisp of your soul are all with me. Are these 2 things worth a trip to the Qingzhou kingdom? Before the end of the month I will be waiting for you in Qingzhou. Remember, you are the only one who can come." Emolien's complexion was ashen, and he raised his hand to erase the face in the flames. He turned to look at Arbor and saw his wifey's expressionless face. She silently glanced at him. Bai Wuxia asked in shock, "Who is that person?" The emperor's expression was cold and furious. "Wuxia, he is the former 2nd young master of the Qin estate and the current leader of Heavenly Fate, Qin Xian." Bai Wuxia nodded his head in astonishment. Although she had seen portraits of the Qin estate's leaders before, it wasn't as realistic as seeing his soul with her own eyes today. Chapter 5478. For this person to be able to pour a wisp of his soul remembrance into the letter and do as he pleased to this extent, it was evident that his divine sense had already reached the acme of perfection. Bai Wuxia glanced at the young couple worriedly. He knew that they already had something to say, so he turned around and said to the emperor, "We also don't know the whole story of this matter. We'll think of how to help after the children finish their discussion." The crown prince was furious on the inside, but he forcefully restrained his emotions on the surface. He nodded at the Emperor and the Empress and said, "Royal Father, Royal Mother, don't worry. This son will take care of this matter." After bidding farewell to the Emperor and Empress, the two of them strolled hand in hand toward the Eastern Palace along a pebble path. After walking for less than 2 minutes, Emolien angrily turned around and pressed the little stoic into her arms. She warned in a low voice, "I forbid you from going, do you hear me?" The little crown princess blinked and nodded. "I didn't say I wanted to go." Prince Emo reached out to grab her chin. He couldn't help but feel deflated when he looked down. How could she not go? Jojo's wisp of soul remembrance and the last fragment of the holy wood were both in that damn Chinexian's hands. The blatant threat in his words practically hit her in the face. She simply didn't need to think deeply about it. So Jojo waved his hand and said unconcernedly, "It's fine for me to be like this right now. I've pretty much found all the fragments of my soul. Even if I'm missing this last fragment, I'll just be more careful in the future and fight less with my divine sense in order to prevent my soul from becoming unstable." It was just a bit of a pity that he couldn't summon the Fushi sword anytime and anywhere. However, compared to going to the kingdom of Qingzhou to see the person he loathed, losing a wisp of his soul wasn't anything to be regretful about. As for the sapling, he'll definitely understand me very well. At worst, Qiuqiu and I will lose a wisp of my soul and he will lose a fragment. Both of us aren't perfect, so let's not mock each other. Master, Qiuqiu might be able to understand you. Qiuqiu also doesn't wish for Master to take risks. Master, we're not going anywhere. You can't send a sheep to the tiger's den and go to Qingzhou by yourself. That's just sending yourself to death. Speaking of Qiuqiu, Qiuqiu arrived and climbed up from her back, kicking its legs above her head, flailing its arms and legs as it shouted angrily. "Let's anger him to death, anger him to death, anger this big bad guy to death. We're not going anywhere." Emolien's handsome face was taut and his thin lips were pursed into a straight line. The words, "I'm very unhappy right now," were written all over his face. Chinexian, this person was simply despicable. What was he thinking? He wanted Jojo to go to Qingzhou alone. Arbor tilted his head and walked 2 steps. When he turned around, he saw that his husband was still standing in the same place. She couldn't help but pout and yell at him, "What are you doing? Let's go back and eat." Emolien came back to her senses and quickly followed after her. She picked up her small waist and with a tap of her foot, she flew out as light as a feather. The little stoic was very dissatisfied. "I can also fly. I also have a flying talisman. You should let me fly you next time." Emolien looked down at this naggy little thing, and his originally gloomy mood inexplicably improved. After dinner, the little stoic solemnly invited Second Ant Master and the Holy Water Sect sisters to the main hall. With a wave of her hand, she released Murong Sun. The pitiful Murong Sun was eating hot pot with the Holy Sons and the others when she was released by the little stoic. She was still holding a pair of chopsticks and looked around in shock. Chapter 5479. Subsequently, Sir Holy Sun also ran out with a steaming pot of hodgepodge soup and stood on the side to watch the commotion. Similarly, Feng Chongqing and the others also came out. Everyone was holding a pair of chopsticks, and some chopsticks were still holding meat slices that hadn't been delivered to their mouths yet. Now that everyone was gathered in one place, they looked at each other and were momentarily at a loss. This stoic was too unreliable. Before letting them out, she didn't even warn them and directly dragged them out. The little stoic expressionlessly glanced at the hot pot in Sir Holy Sun's arms and said dryly, "Just now, your little friend died on the steps outside." "I saw her." Sir Holy Sun hastily put down the pot and shook his head. "She's not my little friend anymore. I have nothing to do with Nye Yaoguang anymore." He could even see a trace of odd contempt on this stoic's face. How preposterous. Letting a man of striking appearance like him hold a pot was truly an eyesore. He saw Nye Yaoguang's matter very clearly in the star domain. Ever since he learned that the Sun Moon Temple's higher-ups, including Nye Yaoguang, were all lackeys of the All-Seer, he had already drawn a clear line between himself and them. Now that he saw Nye Yaoguang's mutated appearance, Sir Holy Sun only felt extremely nauseous and was glad that he had escaped unscathed. Otherwise he really didn't dare to imagine what he would become if he joined a freakish organization like the All-Seer. He might mutate even more and become stronger like Wei Su, or he might become a second Nye Yaoguang and directly evolve into a monster after the mutation failed. But no matter what the outcome was, it wasn't what Sir Holy Sun wanted. He even felt that he had gotten used to staying in the little stoic star domain. Time was tranquil, flowers were blooming, and the scenery of an otherworldly paradise truly couldn't be any better. He really couldn't do it if he had to go out and continue this world of mutual deception and shoulder the mission of restoring the Sun-Moon Temple's glory. The little Stoic looked at Sir Holy Sun and blinked. She had long noticed that Sir Holy Sun and the Phoenix clansmen, MN and possibly Shurchin Ginkgo Peony and the others. She didn't know if it was because they had stayed in her star domain for too long, but now, besides cultivating, they ate, drank, and strolled around the star domain. If she hadn't forced them to come out, they might not even remember to come out to the outside world to pursue new things for 10 days to half a month. The little Stoic discovered that these people had already entered the stage of retirement ahead of time. Was this appropriate? They were all young and were at the age where they had to work hard to improve themselves. Especially Holy Sun Mi Yen. No matter how much he nurtured him, he felt like he had become useless. Previously, when the Divine Hall was destroyed, didn't the Holy Sun say, "If we don't perish in the ashes, we will be reborn in the ashes. And as long as the Divine Hall has you and me, it will eventually rise again." Such impassioned words? 2 priests and 3 divine guards followed him. Later, Priest Radiant Light also returned to follow him. But what happened after that? The Holy Sun didn't know when he would send everyone away. What was going on? After being raised by Sir Jojo in the star field for a while, the Son of God had become more and more useless. Now, he did not even mention anything about the Renaissance Temple? What about his beliefs? God, why don't you want them anymore? Sir Holy Sun almost covered his face with the pot again. What kind of weird gaze was the little Stoic using to stare at him so fixedly? What was she looking at? Can I ask you something? Chapter 5480. When do you plan on reviving the temple? Holy Sun Mi Yen. As expected, the little Stoic was very annoying. She always touched a sore spot and did not want to listen to her. I remember that you previously dispatched Priest Radiant and the others to investigate each state and act according to the circumstances. You wanted to find a place with beautiful scenery to rebuild your temple, right? Did I? Holy Sun Mi Yen looked at her in bewilderment and turned around to face her with the back of his head. You misheard. Arbor? Therefore, Priest Radiant Light and the others had been running around outside for such a long time, and even their shadows were nowhere to be seen. How did they end up with such an unreliable Holy Sun? Sir Jojo gloomily looked at his husband, who was holding back his laughter, and grumbled, I actually raised the temple's Holy Sun into a cripple. At the same time, the dumbfounded Murong Sun met the dumbfounded Yang Shirong's eyes. The latter was rubbing her eyes hard for about a minute before abruptly slapping her thigh. My eyes might be playing tricks on me. Why did I see eldest senior sister? Fang Su, who was slapped hard on the thigh, grimaced and said, Master, your eyes aren't playing tricks on you. Isn't it just eldest senior aunt? Impossible. Yang Shirong waved her hand with certainty and calmly said, I slapped myself hard just now, but I didn't feel any pain at all. I must be dreaming right now. Lamentable, lamentable, pitiful. Right now, I can only meet eldest senior sister and third junior sister in my dreams. So, if there was a mirror right now, Peak Master Yang would definitely pity herself. Su Shanshan couldn't help but twitch her mouth. She glanced at Second Ant Master's vivid expression, and her eyes involuntarily moistened. She recalled Second Ant Master's silly and hilarious behavior during the gathering of the 3 peaks. Fang Su wanted to cry but had no tears. She rubbed her thigh and said, Master, you slapped my thigh hard just now. How could you possibly feel pain? Yang Shirong? So her disciple meant that her eyes weren't playing tricks on her? Senior sister? Murong Sun calmed down before her and nodded with a very composed expression. Second junior sister, long time no see. How have you been? Su Shanshan, Jiang Qi, Lu Ling, and the other disciples of Holy Water Sect's first peak were wiping their tears emotionally. They stared unblinkingly at Murong Sun, practically unable to believe their eyes. When she suddenly saw her second Ant Master, she abruptly jumped up and darted toward Murong Sun at top speed, about to slap Murong Sun's head. Xiao Mu was alarmed and she jumped up from her stool in fright. She shouted, Second Ant Master, have mercy. Her master was only at the early stage of the profound realm, and was as thin as a piece of paper. How could he possibly withstand a palm strike from a divine realm expert? It would be strange if this slap did not kill Murong Sun. It wasn't easy for her to salvage the situation for her Shirzuan Darren. She didn't want to be slapped to death by that foolish second martial uncle. Then who could she cry to? Thankfully, Yang Shirong did not really want to slap Murong Sun's head. Although she hadn't seen her eldest senior sister in a long time, her eldest senior sister's prestige was still there. In the past, It was always eldest senior sister who chased after her and beat her up on the snowy peaks. She never had the chance to hit eldest senior sister. She didn't dare to hit Murong Sun. She reckoned that she would be very miserable after this slap, right? Yang Shirong did not dare to hit Murong Sun, but Murong Sun directly knocked her on the head. Chapter 5481. Disciple also told me that you've matured a lot recently and aren't as silly as before. But I didn't expect that you haven't changed at all after seeing you today. She was still so silly. Yang Shirong looked at Murong Sun in bewilderment for a moment before suddenly pouncing forward and tightly hugging Murong Sun with both arms. She wailed, "Eldest senior sister. I really didn't think that I would be able to see you again in this lifetime. I originally thought it was a dream meeting, but I didn't expect everything to be real." Yang Shirong picked up Murong Sun's sleeve and wiped the tears on her face. She wept and lamented, "It's good that you're back, senior sister. I can finally hand over the burden on my shoulders to you." "In your dreams." Murong Sun couldn't resist retorting. She threw away the hand Yang Shirong was using to wipe her tears and disdainfully swept her eyes over her. "Second junior sister, the sec's future depends on you. I, your eldest senior sister, came back on this trip to recuperate. You look like you've relieved yourself of a burden. It makes people uncomfortable just looking at you." Yang Shirong's eyes widened and she raised her voice in disbelief. "Eldest senior sister, you're actually trying to shirk your responsibility?" Scram. Murong Sun took a step back and turned her head to look at the expressionless arbor. "Disciple, come here." Hence, as soon as she called out, Su Shanshan and the others all pounced over with a whoosh, trapping her in the center of the crowd and preventing her from getting out. Murong Sun originally wanted to pretend to be strong and joke around a bit to smooth out this sorrowful atmosphere. However, when she turned around and saw Su Shanshan and the others crying their hearts out, her eyes involuntarily reddened as well. She truly couldn't continue pretending. Moreover, the little stoic expressionlessly said, "Master, it's not shameful to want to cry. Go ahead and cry. Disciple won't laugh at you." Murong Sun forcibly held back her tears. What an expressionless traitor, Murong Sun thought. She raised her hand to stroke Su Shanshan and the others' heads. Thousands of words converged into a soft sigh. "Thank you for your hard work." She didn't just miss out on time these years. She also missed out on her disciples' growth. She felt regretful just thinking about it. In the days before the full moon banquet, Arbor had been cultivating with his son in the star field. Whenever he had some free time, he would use it to draw talismans and refine pills. He had prepared many things for everyone. She became more and more skilled at drawing talismans. The 11th jade slip of the golden talisman jade tome had also been opened. Arbor felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. It was as if he had drawn talismans countless times in the past. Now that he thought about it, he must have learned it from his master and martial uncle after his soul explosion. He had already broken through to the 11th level of the Spirit Division record, and a 12th branch meridian had been formed in his divine veins. She stayed in the star field for 10 days, but it was 4 months in the outside world. Not only had his talisman skills improved, even his alchemy skills had improved by quite a bit. Presently, not only had Arbor successfully advanced to become a divine grade great talisman master, he was also an extremely outstanding divine grade alchemist. In the past, he would have to spend an entire day and night to make the soul-returning pill. Now he only needed an hour to make it. After all, this fellow had nothing to do, so he guarded the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron in the star field and continuously refined soul-returning pills. Now, every soul-returning pill she refined could reach the level of a black vein pill. Her pill refinement skills were extraordinary beyond compare. Chapter 5482. However, it was her talisman art. Sir Jojo frowned. The probability of her drawing a sacred grade golden talisman was still 50-50. In other words, she could draw at most 50 sacred grade golden talismans out of 100 talismans. The rest would still be purple talismans. But even so, if these words were to spread out, it would still frighten others. If old Master Mu knew that his granddaughter could draw a sacred grade golden talisman out of every 2 talismans she drew, wouldn't he faint from fright? Currently, she had drawn at least 10 divine rank sacred grade golden talisman storage jade talismans, which could hold about half of the entire Dragon Flame City. It could be said that ordinary cultivators could live a carefree life with just 1 sacred grade golden talisman storage jade talisman. What made Arbor the happiest was that the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron's 9 stars were shining brightly after her relentless feeding and pill refinement. Only the crescent moon in the middle was still dim and lightless. Now, the deterrence her colored glass cauldron fire released was no different from a sacred fire. Sir Jojo was very happy that his little cauldron could develop to its current state. After all, when he first saw it, it really was an unprepossessing little lousy cauldron. Today, Emolien had returned early in the morning. He drew close to her mysteriously and whispered into her ear, "Chow Chow, I found something." Arbor looked up and glanced at him. "Tomorrow is our son's 1-month-old banquet. Why isn't Duan Yu here yet?" Prince Emo secretly ground his teeth. These past 2 days, Chow Chow had asked this question the most. Duan Yu was so annoying, Duan Yu was so annoying. Duan Yu probably won't be able to come. Emolien answered expressionlessly. This guy was far away in Qingzhou. Why would he come? Why would he come? Sir Jojo was rather displeased. He took out a jade ornament and hung it on his son's waist. Look, he's already given the gift, so why isn't he here yet? This jade ornament was probably a token that could mobilize a portion of Cangzhou's manpower and resources. It was also very likely that it could mobilize the royal palace guards. Hence, this jade ornament was probably the symbol of Cangzhou's emperor, representing power and wealth. Duan Yu, this idiot, gave this toy to his son as soon as he made a move. Prince Emo lowered his head to look at his expressionless son and complained in his heart. Why was her son always so expressionless when he saw his father? Her son was as soft as a glutinous rice ball. He hugged his father and called him father. He was so cute. What was wrong with his son? Arbor was slightly stunned. He lowered his head and saw that the jade ornament hanging on his son's waist had disappeared. He guessed that his son had taken it back into his inner world. The couple's lips twitched. At the same time, they felt that the way their son looked at them with an expressionless face was inexplicably cute. What was going on? This little thing actually knew how to store precious things in its inner world so that it wouldn't be carried around by others and stolen? Arbor glanced back at his husband and said expressionlessly, "Your son is so much like you. She's as stingy as you." Then he sighed and shook his head. Before Emolien could reply, flabbergasted, the little stoic had already stood up and pattered out the door. "Just now, I heard someone report that the person from Ming province has come." Emolien picked up her son in exasperation and followed behind her. "You're still going to welcome him? When did his wife become so close to ACI?" The crown prince instantly felt a sense of crisis. Who's welcoming him? Arbor was baffled. "It's time, let's go to the dining room." Chapter 5483. Emolien was speechless. Wife. He hurriedly chased after her with the baby in his arms and hugged her with a smile. "I was talking to you just now. You didn't even respond to me halfway through." Arbor turned her head to look at him. "Did you find that mysterious hall master?" Emolien was a little discouraged and shook her head. "I didn't find any trace of that mysterious hall master, but I saw Luo He. The deputy hall master of the talisman incantation hall, Luo He?" Arbor frowned slightly. "Oh. Jojo, aren't you curious at all?" Emolien poked her round cheeks with dissatisfaction. "Besides Luo He, guess who else I saw?" Arbor's eyes brightened. "That mysterious great master Yi?" Emolien broke into laughter and shook her head. "It's Mu Xiaoxua. So it's her." Arbor responded faintly, her expression slightly disdainful. "Your Highness, Crown Princess." Eunuch Qin hurried over and couldn't help but sigh in relief when he saw them. "His Highness the Crown Prince of Ming Province has arrived." "So what if he's here?" Emolien retorted exasperatedly. "He even specially came to inform them." So what if he's here? Does he expect them to line up to welcome him?" Eunuch Qin couldn't help but twitch his mouth and said seriously, "The Crown Prince of Ming Province wants your Highness and the Crown Princess to treat him to a meal." Emolien was very unhappy. "Why do you want to treat him to a meal again? Didn't you treat him to a meal every day when we were on the island last time?" Arbor nodded her little head as if they had a common enemy. "Oh, let him go out and find a restaurant to eat." Eunuch Qin's mouth twitched as he complained incessantly in his heart. "It's the Crown Princess. Even if the two of you don't treat him to a meal to welcome the Crown Prince of Ming Province, wouldn't the palace's kitchen be able to make a sumptuous imperial meal? Asking someone to eat at a restaurant on the street was truly unheard of. Ming Yasi came uninvited. I hope the Crown Prince of the Divine Prefecture can forgive me." As the voice fell, a young man wearing an iron gray cloak walked over with straight legs and appeared in front of everyone. The maids and eunuchs of the Eastern Palace couldn't help but sneak a glance at him. Ming Yasi's pitch-black eyes stared fixedly at the two people on his stern and handsome face. His lips were tightly pursed, and his gaze directly went past Emolien to land on the child in his hands. Seeing that the Grand Master looked like he was going to beat up the crown prince and steal his child, the palace maids and eunuchs silently raised their legs to block the crown prince. Their family's little master was still young. He was not even a month old, so he could not be scared of anything. Mingyasi strode over and rudely pushed aside the eunuch in front of him. "Get out of the way. What are you doing?" Arbor roared with his eyes wide open. Mingyasi's hand paused as he glanced at her angrily. He already knew how protective this guy was of his own people. Back then, he threw some weapons at Murong Sun and her group, but this damn girl looked down on him from beginning to end until today. It was as infuriating as it could be. Mingyasi's handsome face darkened as he stretched out his hands in Baby Mo's direction. "Hand it over." "And what over? Do you think it's an object?" Emolien and Arbor glared at him ferociously at the same time, looking like they were eager to protect their child. "Hand it over for a hug," Mingyasi said awkwardly with a cold expression. Xiao Mu immediately reached out and took the child from her husband's arms with a protective expression on her face. Chapter 5484. She glared at Mingyasi and said, "What are you trying to do? Are you trying to take revenge on my baby? You saw that I wasn't easy to deal with, so you had a brainwave and wanted to trip my baby up?" Emolien's mouth twitched and he looked at Mingyasi sympathetically. Sure enough, smoke was already coming out of the latter's head as he choked on his anger. "I'm telling you, no way." Arbor roared at him again. She hugged the baby with both hands, but her eyes were still glaring fiercely at Mingyasi. Mingyasi retorted exasperatedly, "Do you think I'm like you? Heartless and emotionless with a stoic face. Do I need to lay my hands on a baby? Hand it over." Arbor turned her head angrily. "Husband." Emolien was used to being called by his wife, so when he heard his wife call him that, he immediately took a step forward and rolled up his sleeves, looking like he was going to pick a fight with Mingyasi. Mingyasi was so angry that he was amused. He took out a palm-sized jade fan from his sleeve. There were even some pearls and jade tassels hanging from the bottom of the fan. It looked exquisite, small and pretty. "I'm here to give you a gift. Don't be ungrateful." Fuck, rushing over to give him a gift. This couple really made his heart ache every time he saw them. That darn lass, darn lass, darn lass. So many years had passed, but her temper was still as bad as ever, just like when they first met. What a vicious and petty person. Arbor blinked. She only felt that her hands were empty, and her son had already floated in Mingyasi's direction. The couple was instantly speechless. The son was too immoral. Why would he automatically float over as long as there was something good? Mingyasi was also taken aback. He didn't expect that the baby would come over on his own. This tiny baby, not even the size of a cat, was suspended in midair and staring at him expressionlessly. Why did this scene make one's scalp go numb? Why was the child of the crown prince and darn lass so different from other people's babies? Mingyasi followed the baby's gaze downwards and landed on the jade fan in his hand. He hurriedly handed that exquisite little thing over. He himself didn't understand what was going on. It was clearly a baby in front of him. Was it possible for him to hand it over? Does the other party have hands to hold it? Just as he felt that his actions were strange and comical, he saw a flash of light on the jade fan in his hand, and it disappeared in an instant. Mingyasi? Did this kid inherit Jojo's fine tradition? How did he receive gifts so quickly? Moreover, this little fellow had put the jade fan into his inner world? Dark Yas felt that this thought of his was somewhat terrifying. What kind of person could have an inner world? Only 1 in 10,000 people would be able to open their profound veins. Although the divine land was rich in spiritual power, it was rare for a child to be born with an inner world. Baby Mo stared at the person in front of him expressionlessly. After receiving the gift, he silently floated back to Arbor. The child did a beautiful somersault in the air and landed perfectly in Arbor's outstretched hands. Everyone was speechless as they stared at the swaddled baby with strange gazes. Arbor looked at Dias expressionlessly and curled the corners of his mouth. He forced a smile that didn't look like a smile. The child resembles his father. Please forgive me. Prince Mo didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He had received 10,000 critical hits. Mingyasi was speechless. He glanced at Arbor. I heard that the people from Tianyun sent you a special letter a few days ago? You're quite well informed. Arbor glanced at him indifferently. The letter asked you to go to Qingzhou? Chapter 5485. Arbor didn't reply, but his expression clearly implied his tacit agreement. Ming Yasi couldn't help but become agitated and grumpily retorted, "You aren't really thinking of going, right? You're usually so smart and arrogant, so why do you like to drop the ball at crucial moments?" Sir Jojo glowered at him as he silently took out a shiny golden club from his inner world. Emolienne twitched her mouth and wanted to go up to hold his impulsive wife's hand. However, Ming Yasi, this death-seeking fellow, continued to prattle on in front of Jojo. "Do you know the situation in the kingdom of Qing province? Right now it's completely blocked by countless zombies. Don't joke around if you go. Let me tell you, that's where I came from. With your strength alone, it's impossible for you to sneak in, unless you force your way in. You must be clear-headed. Didn't you see that Duan Yu hasn't made much of a move for so long? He's such a black-bellied and shameless scoundrel. Something that can make him treat it so cautiously definitely isn't simple. Perhaps there's something incredible hidden inside and outside of Qing province. You must not walk right into a trap. You'll be out of your mind if you go. You're the one who's out of your mind." Arbor abruptly raised his golden club and smashed it at Ming Yasi's head. Emolienne couldn't resist covering her face with her hands. Ming Yasi was even more frightened, and he immediately turned to flee. "I'm saying this for your own good." He furiously turned back and roared at her, "Don't think that you're so capable. I couldn't beat you several years ago because my spirit meridians were sealed. But that doesn't mean I can't beat you now. I'm telling you, I'm just giving in to you. Your virtue is because you've been spoiled. But do you think that the Qin family's pack of ambitious thieves will give in to you like I did? If you dare to brandish a knife in front of that old geezer Ziqin, he'll dare to send several hundred zombies to gnaw you to death." Io Ming Yas tilted his head to the side and dodged a fiery meteor. When he turned around to look, he saw the little stoic stopping with a spurious smile. She raised the golden club in her hand and retorted with a single word, "Long-winded." Minya was so angry that he turned around and glared fiercely at Emolienne. Prince Mo, baby Mo, who had been stuffed into her husband's arms before the beating, floated up on its own again. This fellow was like a spirit on her back, drifting along with his mother. Wherever his mother went, he would follow, always hanging behind his mother's back. This strange scene made the corners of everyone's eyes involuntarily twitch. Arbor slapped the club in his hand and said angrily, "Who told you that I'm going to Qingzhou?" Ming Yasi glanced at her. "Given your character, how could you not go?" Jojo-sama glared at him. Ming Yasi calmed himself down and continued, "You have to know that is the headquarters of the Tianyun organization. You also said that this organization, Tianyun, has accumulated power for over 100 years. It's just that it's only gradually surfaced now. It's clear that the faction behind it isn't small. Even a swindler like Duan Yu has to be cautious, so how could you go there and act rashly?" Arbor silently glared at him when she heard his long-winded speech. You all understand him quite well." He made it seem like Sir Jojo was the only one who didn't understand him. Jojo was disgruntled and turned to glare fiercely at her husband before turning to trot away. Her son followed behind her and floated along. Chapter 5486. This scene was inexplicably bizarre and comical, and the onlookers couldn't help laughing. Emolienne silently turned back to glance at Ming Yasi as she grumbled in her mind, "It's fine if you two are quarreling, but why are you glaring at me when you're upset?" Ming Yasi was even more at a loss for words, and he turned to glare at Emolienne again. "This little ancestor, can't you listen to the main point?" After listening for half a day, she said something along the lines of, "You two understand him quite well." What does she mean? Is she angry? Emolienne irritably rolled her eyes at him. Isn't it obvious? How can she leave if she's not angry? It's all that guy Duan Yu's fault. It's fine if you don't mention him, but Jojo gets even angrier when he's mentioned. The irritated Ming province's crown prince casually picked someone to berate. However, Emolienne was amused by his rascally behavior and irritably retorted, "Do you think it's easy to bully him just because he's not here? You're venting your anger on him when there's no one to vent it on." She was used to berating Duan Yu, but it was usually her berating him. Why did it feel a little jarring when she heard someone else berating him? She inexplicably wanted to retort. It must be because there were too many things troubling him recently, so he was also irritated. Simply baffling. Emolienne turned to leave in a huff as she casually muttered, "It's not like he's your punching bag." Ming Yasi glared at her departing figure and angrily asked, "Hey, why are you leaving too? Hey, I'm here as a guest, but you're not even going to treat me to a meal? What kind of freaking hospitality was this?" Why don't you ascend to the heavens? The royal maids and eunuchs who had been watching a good show quickly turned around and pretended to be busy wiping the tables, stools, vases, and curtains. They secretly turned to look at the Ming province's crown prince, who was hopping mad. Everyone silently felt that the Ming province's crown prince seemed a bit miserable. They didn't know what was going on, but they just felt that this guy seemed to have been completely ignored. Arbor stomped around the garden for a long time before she realized that her son was like a little shadow, floating behind her. This child usually didn't make much noise. If you teased him for a long time, he might just give you a lazy response. Arbor thought it was a little funny. She reached out and hugged the child, caressing his little face. Son, mother isn't angry. Mother just feels a little annoyed. Why do they all think that I, your mother, would be impulsive and brainless? Don't you think they are stupid? They are the brainless ones, not mother. Baby Mo's black eyes stared at Arbor and suddenly blinked. Arbor immediately kissed him happily. See, even her son was blinking at her in approval. As expected of her son, he could understand everything she said. A bunch of brainless fellows. How dare you say that your mother is stupid? They are the real idiots. The little stoic muttered as she walked past the flower path with her son in her arms. Suddenly, she turned her head and shot a cold glance over. Attack talisman, attack talisman, attack talisman. She threw out 3 god-rank attack talismans consecutively, landing in the direction of the flower thicket. Following the 3 bangs, Arbor's gaze instantly chilled. Do you think this crown princess can't see you because you have an invisibility talisman stuck on you? Come out obediently, and I can still consider sparing your life. Reveal talisman, reveal talisman, reveal talisman. Arbor's fingers moved, and she threw out several dozen reveal talismans in all directions. They were as fast as shooting stars and instantly landed in the flower thicket. Chapter 5487. Streaks of talisman energy flowed past, and under the whooshing of light and shadow, 2 sneaky figures emerged as expected. However, they abruptly hid behind a tree. Arbor chuckled and abruptly struck out with her palm. You're courting death. With a crisp bang, half of the short tree was immediately snapped in half by the wind from her palm. Arbor recalled her son into the star domain in passing before swiftly darting over and viciously smashing her fist down. When Ming Yasi and Prince Mo rushed over, they saw the little stoic ruthlessly smashing her opponent's big head with her fist. The group of hidden guards stood expressionlessly on the side, wielding swords and sabers, but no one stepped forward to help. Ming Yasi's mouth twitched. He felt that the little stoic seemed to be even more violent than before. He couldn't bear to look straight at her, but he still couldn't resist shouting, "What are you all standing around for?" How could they let their master charge forward alone while a group of hidden guards leisurely watched from the side? They really were a bunch of insensible fellows. The hidden guard leader abruptly glanced at the Ming province's crown prince. That contemptuous gaze disgusted the Ming province's crown prince. Fuck, this guy even dared to despise him. Seeing that Ming Yasi was about to jump forward, 2 of the hidden guards very kindly extended their arms to block him. You probably don't understand our crown princess very well. Our crown princess didn't call for the crown princess personal guards today. This means that the crown princess doesn't need us to attack at the moment, and you don't need to go forward and help. If you help, the crown princess probably won't be too happy. Ming Yasi, as expected, you guys have captured the crown princess's heart. These words were extremely reasonable, so Ming Yasi stopped and silently stood to the side. He glanced at Mo Lien, who was also watching with folded arms, and harumphed. You actually found a group of considerate hidden guards. They quite understand their master's intentions. Mo Lien conveniently cast him a glance and sneered, why don't you take a look at who hired these hidden guards? How can the people I recruit be bad? Ming Yasi instantly didn't want to talk to this person in front of him. He turned his head and didn't look at him. Mo Lien couldn't help but curl her lips. She cursed in her heart, you make it sound like I really want to talk to you. If you don't want to talk, then don't talk. You'd better stay away from me. However, Mo Lien ignored him, so he couldn't resist turning back to say to Mo Lien, you probably don't know how deranged that guy Duan Yu is in the kingdom of Qing state, right? Mo Lien looked at him expressionlessly. Don't even think about trying to sow discord. This monarch will not listen to your untruthful words. Did you know that Duan Yu would have people use you and Jojo's name to go up the city gate tower to shout insults every few days? Oh, that's right, you probably don't know, but Duan Yu had someone build a watchtower outside of Qingzhou to allow his subordinates to go up and curse in the streets every day. He's mainly hiding in the back and not saying anything, but he's using you and Jojo's name to scold us. Tell me, why do you have such a bad friend? Emolien, the kingdom of Qing State was a small kingdom to begin with. The entire kingdom was even slightly smaller than Dragon Flame City. As long as they could invade the kingdom of Qing State, they could basically invade their capital within a day. Hence, Ming Yasi seriously suspected that Duan Yu, this idiot, might have discovered something, which was why he hadn't made a move yet. His subordinates used 18 different styles of cursing and even said that they were following your and Jojo's orders to participate in this war of words. Emolien, you don't know, right? That guy has done so many deranged things behind your backs. Who says I don't know? Chapter 5488. Emolien was so annoyed by his words that she couldn't resist rebuking him coldly. This time, it was Ming Yas's turn to be stupefied, and he stared at him in disbelief. You knew. Realization dawned on him. So it turns out that you and him are secretly communicating with each other? Then does Jojo know? Jojo definitely doesn't know. Prince Emo wished for nothing more than to slap him to death. Do you know how to speak? What do you mean by communicating with each other? What kind of fucking words are you using? You scoundrel. Scram. Who are you telling to scram? Ming Yas glared at him. You better be more polite to me. I'm not that person from many years ago who could be casually beaten and scolded by you. What a pitiful child. While they were speaking, Arbor had already swiftly ended the battle. He kicked the two fellows who were forced out by the appearance talisman and kicked them in front of Emolien and Ming Yas. Everyone silently retreated, leaving a suitable distance to continue spectating. The little stoic charged forward with a golden club in her hand. Without any explanation, she smashed the two people who still wanted to get up to the ground with two bangs. She took advantage of the situation and kicked the person in front of her, sending him tumbling forward until he reached a hidden guard. The group of secret guards very considerately retreated a bit, forming a perfect encirclement, trapping the person in a circle. As long as the guarantor didn't escape the encirclement, the rest would depend on how the crown princess would perform. As expected, the little crown princess didn't disappoint. She threw down two binding talismans, making it difficult for the thief to escape even though he had spun a cocoon around himself. Both of them were bound by the binding talismans and couldn't move for a moment. Arbor leaped forward and viciously smashed the club into that person's back, directly knocking him to the ground. Speak, did that Hall Master of Charms send you guys to scout for information? Arbor stepped on that person. Don't try to deceive me. I know you guys are people of the Blessed Ones. With the enhancement of invisibility talismans and aura concealing talisman matrix, it wouldn't be believable if they said they weren't disciples of the Blessed Ones. But how could the two of them sneak into the garden of the Eastern Palace? The two of them were only at the high level of the spirit realm. The young crown princess knew very well that with their skills, it was almost impossible for them to get past the many spies outside the Eastern Palace and the various checkpoints to get here. So these two people should have come in through normal means? She sized up their attire. Sure enough, they were dressed in eunuch attire. Moreover, this kind of eunuch attire should be the attire of the kitchen in the backyard. Prince Mo's expression instantly chilled. He beckoned for Hui Feng to come over and quietly instructed, "Pass down my orders. Strictly investigate every courtyard and place to see if there are any outsiders who have snuck in. Once discovered, kill them on the spot." Yes. Hui Feng knew the severity of the situation, so he immediately accepted the order and left. At the same time, the young crown princess stared coldly at the two who had committed suicide by consuming poison on the ground. If he died, then so be it. He could still ask questions even if he died. He could ask for more details. Qiao Mu's lips curled into a sneer. With a flick of her finger, two strands of talisman energy emerged from the two soul-summoning talismans and instantly burrowed into the two people's foreheads. Although Arbor couldn't see the souls, she could sense the talisman energy within the souls. Thus, she coldly questioned the two wandering souls the moment they appeared. Unfortunately, the other party knew very little. This was also what she had expected. After dispersing the two wandering souls, Arbor turned to look at her husband with a dark expression. Tomorrow definitely won't be peaceful. Chapter 5489. The next day, before the sun had even risen, everyone in the palace was already busy with their respective duties. Today was the little imperial grandson's 1-month-old birthday banquet, so they had to make it a perfect one. Actually, everyone had already started preparing half a month ago. Today, Everyone was just in their respective positions to ensure that no mistakes were made and no one caused trouble. The banquet was held in the Eastern Palace's Sanua Hall. The little imperial grandson was placed on a small jade bed in the warm room, watched over by 2 wet nurses and 4 palace maids. When the banquet attendees arrived at the Eastern Palace, they all eagerly looked at the little baby. Once this baby was born, he would be a precious and pampered child. Putting aside the fact that His Majesty had pardoned the world for his sake, this child's parents were also such extraordinary people. He inherited his parents' terrifying talent and caused a huge commotion with 3 days and 3 nights of heavenly tribulation and lightning punishment as soon as he was born. Such a little baby would definitely have a bright future. Princess Consort Kong was overjoyed as she held baby Mo. Several first-rank titled madams also surrounded the princess consort, laughing and playing with the baby. The baby remained expressionless and did not smile. There were no fluctuations in his heart. This calm little face made the princess consort very amused. She waved a small jade ruby in her hand and called out, "Little dumpling, little dumpling." Suddenly she realized that the jade ruby in her hand had disappeared. Princess Consort Kong looked at her palm in confusion, then took out a golden pendant from the jade plate at the side to tease the baby. The 2 wet nurses who were squeezed by the group of madams couldn't help but facepalm. The little imperial grandson was now at the age where he was interested in everything. Basically, as long as something flashed in front of his eyes, the little imperial grandson would treat it as his own possession and silently store it in his inner world. No one knew who he had this problem with. After this happened a few times, the princess consort noticed that something was wrong and called out to the wet nurses in surprise, "Nanny, Nanny, does this child have an inner world?" A slightly older wet nurse said with a smile, "That's right, Princess Consort. The little imperial grandson had an inner world when he was born." Not only that, the little imperial grandson was also the youngest godly realm expert in the 3 continents. Wang Fei couldn't help but roar with laughter. She reached out to tap the little baby's pearl-like forehead. "Io, Auntie's little darling, why are you so cute?" When the little stoic sent people to invite the titled madams over, everyone was in the middle of a heated game with the little stoic royal grandson. Their so-called game was to take out good things from their pockets and dangle them in front of the little prince's eyes, only to see them disappear one by one. After repeating this several times, the group of women actually laughed heartily. When Princess Kong returned to the main hall of Sanua Palace, she was very happy to see Jojo. She kept telling her about baby Mo's interesting stories. Arbor first glanced at her, then was slightly stunned, and then looked her up and down a few times. Princess Consort Kong immediately looked down at herself and asked in confusion, "What's wrong, Jojo?" Arbor blinked and looked expressionlessly at Princess Consort Kong. He raised a hand to grasp her wrist and quickly took her pulse. Subsequently, Sir Jojo looked at her with sparkling eyes and said crisply, "Royal Aunt, congratulations." Princess Consort Kong was a bit baffled. "Jojo, what are you congratulating me for?" "You're more than a month pregnant, Royal Aunt." "What?" The little crown princess's voice wasn't soft, so there were many people in the main hall right now. Today was the little imperial grandson's 1-month-old birthday banquet, so the male and female guests weren't seated separately. Instead, they were all in the same hall. Chapter 5490. When the little stoic said this, not only did the nearby titled madams and royal court officials hear it clearly, but some of the patrician family's madams and young misses also heard it. Princess Consort Kong instantly revealed a pleasantly surprised expression, and her voice trembled slightly. "Jojo, you didn't deceive Royal Aunt?" Arbor stroked the back of her hand and said with a nod, "Royal Aunt, it's absolutely true. It's been more than a month." Lu Lanyun couldn't help but tremble in her pleasant surprise. Arbor was already on guard and knew that Lu Lanyun must be very excited right now, so he hastily helped her to sit down on the side. "Royal Aunt, I'll prescribe a nourishing prescription for you. You just need to take it once every 3 days. Your body has been nourished very well and the child is also very healthy." "Jojo." Lu Lanyun couldn't resist crying tears of joy. She held Arbor's hand and nodded repeatedly. "Royal Aunt is really, I don't know what to say. It's all thanks to you, Jojo. Don't mention it. We're all family, so it's only right." Arbor was speaking with Lu Lanyun. Just then he heard cries of surprise from the door. Prince, hurry and help Prince, hurry and help him up." What happened? It seems like the old prince was too excited when he heard that the princess consort was pregnant, so he tripped over the threshold. A madam explained while suppressing her laughter. Arbor couldn't help but twitch his mouth when he heard this. When he looked up, he saw Prince Kong running over aggressively, as though he was seeking revenge on someone, Princess Consort. The old prince jogged over and hastily grabbed his wife's hand, asking excitedly, "I heard them say that you, Princess Consort." Kong couldn't help but chuckle when she saw his stupidly excited appearance. She nodded at him with a smile and said, "It's Jojo's conclusion," after taking her pulse. Then it was undoubtedly accurate. In this world, who didn't know of Xiqiao's alchemy skills? The old prince couldn't help but laugh until his eyes turned into slits. The crowd of courtiers and upper-class women hurriedly came forward to form a circle, smiling as they congratulated Prince Kong and his wife. Nowadays, the old prince found anyone pleasing to his eyes. Everyone he saw had a good expression on their faces and he laughed heartily. Arbor was also very happy. Auntie Emperor's sufferings were finally over. After her body recovered, everything would be better in the future. Arbor took the time to visit his son in front of the jade bed in the warm room. She picked up the baby and played with him for a while. Then she patted the baby's swaddling clothes and coaxed him to sleep. Only then did she gently place the child back into the small jade bed. After covering him with a small blanket, she slowly stood up. "All right, let the child sleep for a while. There's no need for so many people to stay here." "Yes." Everyone saluted in unison and left one by one. In the end, only a wet nurse was left in front of the jade bed to watch over the child. Arbor also turned to leave, but when he reached the door, the corner of his mouth slightly raised into a sneer. The atmosphere in the Three Mountain Palace's main hall was excellent. It just so happened that the little imperial grandson was 1 month old, and they also heard that Prince Kong and his wife were expecting a child. It really was one happy event after another. The emperor and empress were also very happy. However, it was in this joyous atmosphere that a wet nurse who had been beaten bloody ran out of the warm room and shouted in panic, "Oh no, the little imperial grandson has been taken away." Bai Wuxia jumped up from his throne and sternly rebuked, "What did you say?" The wet nurse fell to her knees with a thump. Chapter 5491. She kowtowed repeatedly with all her might and cried, "Your Majesty, this old servant deserves to die 10,000 deaths. I was unable to properly protect the young master." Just now, a black-clothed masked man suddenly appeared behind this old servant and viciously smashed this old servant with an unknown object. Fortunately, this old servant's head was hard enough and did not faint. That thief snatched the young imperial grandson and escaped through the window. When this old servant chased after him, I discovered that the servants outside the warm room had long been drugged unconscious and were lying all over the floor. Your Majesty, it's still not too late to chase after him. That person should not have escaped from Three Mountains Palace. Just as they were speaking, someone among the guests exclaimed, "A black-clothed masked man." Everyone hastily rushed out of Three Mountains Palace. Sure enough, they saw a black-clothed masked man jump onto the wall with a whoosh. He seemed to be carrying something in his hand. The Empress was so frightened that her entire body trembled. She pointed at the wall and shouted sternly, "Stop him!" Hundreds of hidden guards flocked over and flew out after jumping onto the wall. However, the black-clothed masked man was faster than everyone else. He had already jumped off the high wall and swiftly concealed himself. Xiao Mu stomped her feet and suddenly called out, "Baby ya," in an extremely pretentious manner. She then flew out with a whoosh and leaped onto the top of the wall, disappearing without a trace. Everyone was startled by her shrill cry of "baby." Prince Imo, who was standing beside his lovely wife, couldn't help but silently raise his hand to cover his face. His wife's acting was really fake enough. Sure enough, the quick-witted Empress Bai immediately sensed that something was wrong. She turned back and glared fiercely at her son. What's going on? These two brats, she didn't know what they were scheming. They actually didn't tell her, causing her heart to clench for a moment just now. Her daughter-in-law's baby was too casual and careless. It didn't sound like she was really anxious hearing this little rascal's cry. Empress Bai was instead relieved. Ming Yasi understood this pair of black-hearted people even more. He hurriedly lowered his voice and asked, "What are you guys doing? Where's the child?" The crown prince ignored him and followed after them in a flash. Seeing this, how could Yas wait idly? He hurriedly brought his men and rushed over as well. Xiao Mu chased after the black-clothed and masked man with quick steps, wretchedly shrieking, "Baby, let go of my baby." The secret guards silently cooperated and couldn't help but wave their sleeves to wipe off the cold sweat on their foreheads. "Master, your words are too fake." Arbor blinked. How could it be fake? I've seen people act like this on stage when they lose their children. Chio. He didn't know what to do to save his little master. Sometimes, Master Silver looked exceptionally intelligent, but other times he felt like an idiot. Arbor threw out several revealing talismans and screamed miserably, "Come out, hero! Everything is negotiable. Let go of my child. I'll promise you anything you want, sob. Chio. Blurg next time he definitely couldn't let his Master Silver go and watch those messy dramas that were put on the stage. What was all this about? Recently, Despondent Pavilion had been putting on some bitter and tear-inducing dramas, and it was especially popular with the madams and young misses in the capital. Chio couldn't help but facepalm. Master Silver had learned a lot. Arbor stopped and looked around with teary eyes. Suddenly, hundreds of black-clothed, masked and uniformed pursuers emerged from the bushes, surrounding her in the center. Chapter 5492. Arbor covered her face with her handkerchief and sobbed. Chio was speechless. "Master, I'm begging you, can you not act so pretentiously?" Chio really wanted to tell Master Silver that her high and mighty image in the past had already been established in everyone's hearts. No one would think that she was a weak and helpless little wife. As expected, the hundreds of masked men in black all looked at her in astonishment and exchanged glances. "Be careful of traps," one of the masked men said in a low voice. Master had once instructed that the woman in front of them was extremely difficult to deal with. She was cunning, ruthless, and vicious. But why did it feel like Master's description of the woman in front of them didn't match? Therefore this woman must be pretending. However, there was also a possibility that Master's calculations were very accurate. This woman's weakness was the child that they had captured. As expected, Master's guess was right. A child was indeed the most important thing to a mother. Once the child was captured, no matter how strong a woman was, she would have to obediently submit like a little lamb. The crowd opened up a path for the man holding the baby to walk over. This person was the leader of the masked men who had grabbed baby Mo and jumped onto the wall. At this moment, his vicious little eyes were shining. He held the baby tightly in one hand and let out a sharp and cold laugh. "Arbor, you didn't think that you would have such a day, did you?" Master Jojo held her handkerchief and stared at the baby in the man's hand with watery eyes. She stretched out a pair of small claws and called out weakly and pitifully, "Baby!" Prince Emo and Ming Yas, who had rushed over, couldn't help but look at each other silently. Jojo's act wasn't over yet. Master Jojo, who was possessed by the drama queen, used her handkerchief to wipe the tears from the corners of her eyes and said pitifully, "Big brother, please have mercy. If my son loses a single hair, I will definitely make your entire family pay with blood. Not only that, I will also make you disappear into thin air. Not even a single hair of yours will exist in this world." Her voice became colder and colder as she spoke. He raised his head and stared at the other party with a pair of cold and merciless eyes. Chin Grass, who was holding the baby, felt her body stiffen. She couldn't help but shudder. The gaze of this damn woman, Xiao Mu, was incomparably frigid, just like the icy soul pearl. Even though he was mentally prepared, he couldn't help but be frightened by her. Seeing Arbor take a step forward, Qin Xiao couldn't help but take a step back with the baby in her arms. She then turned around and ran, one hand still tightly clutching the baby's neck. "All of you back off. If he dares to chase, I will kill him." Sir Jojo's eyes lit up as he hurriedly shouted, "Baby!" She shouted frantically, "Don't move, don't move." After saying that, one of them hurriedly chased after him. Like I said, the show is halfway through. If you quit halfway, it wouldn't be fun anymore. Since these people were targeting her, she had to meet them no matter what. Ming Yash chased after him for 2 steps before Arbor shouted, "Don't move." He turned to look at Emolien. "What's that in that person's hand?" Xiao, that cunning little scoundrel. It was impossible for her to leave her son alone in the warm room. He must have swapped the baby long ago. Chin Grass grabbed the baby with one hand and ran wildly while looking back. Chapter 5493. Seeing Arbor chase after him, a sinister sneer involuntarily surfaced on Chin Grass's lips. "The effect of you chasing after me alone is exactly what I want. As long as you dare to chase after me, you won't be far from death." A sinister glint flitted through Chin Grass's eyes, and he abruptly raised his hand. Many black-clothed and masked men jumped out from all directions and surrounded them. Several hundred yellow talismans floated up in the air and circled around the crowd before rapidly gathering around Arbor. Like shackles, they abruptly trapped her inside. Cheen Grass watched as the little stoic ran headfirst into the talisman formation in a panic and frantically pulled at the talismans in front of her. She shouted in panic, "Who exactly are you? Why did you capture my son? Let go of my son." "Baby," a carefree smile instantly flitted across Cheen Grass's heart. As expected, a woman who lost her child was like a tiger without its fangs and didn't possess the slightest bit of deterrence. That woman's chilly venomous glare just now must have been a misconception. How would she dare to be unyielding with them now? They captured her child, so she could only allow herself to be captured. Enough nonsense. Now obediently walk and hear yourself. Cheen Grass took out a triangular tent from his inner world and said coldly to Arbor, "Otherwise I'll strangle him to death." Faint disdain flitted across Arbor's eyes as she was wrapped in a pile of yellow talismans. She thought they had some way to take her away. But it turned out they only wanted to take her son away to restrain her. Their method of taking her away was also extremely barbaric and crude. Using the space spiritual abode to store her was underestimating JoJo too much. "You don't have any other methods?" Arbor couldn't help but ask again. Cheen Grass? Why did he inexplicably feel that the situation in front of him was a bit off? "I've cooperated with you until now, but you only sent these few people?" Arbor gloomily glared at the several hundred masked men in black. "You have to work hard." She clenched her small fists and made an encouraging gesture for everyone. "Cheen Grass, I thought you would send at least 1,000 people to capture me. At the very least, you should send that mysterious hall master of your talisman hall. At the very least you should send Luo He. Why is it only you bunch of shrimps?" Arbor was indignant. She pointed at them and said angrily, "Are you looking down on this crown princess?" After a round of reprimanding, Cheen Grass and the others were dumbfounded. What was the situation now? What's going on? Emolien held back her laughter and cleared her throat. She couldn't help but reveal herself. "All right, JoJo, these are the people in front of you." Arbor swept away the messy pile of yellow talismans in front of his eyes and stepped on them several times. Then he took 2 steps forward and slapped Cheen Grass. "Idiot." The corner of Mingyasi's mouth twitched. "Do you think that no one will find out just because you sent some people to infiltrate the Eastern Palace? That wet nurse was left behind on purpose to help you. Otherwise we would have dealt with her yesterday." Arbor roared at him in annoyance, his face gloomy and angry. "To think that I was full of anticipation, wondering how your Cheen Hong would deal with me. And the result?" Arbor roared at Cheen Grass. "Useless." "Everyone," she lifted the tent in Cheen Hong's hands and stepped on it twice. "You want to take JoJo away with a lousy spiritual abode? Dream on. Where are the Crown Princess's personal guards?" A group of secret guards suddenly jumped forward and answered in unison, "Here." Chapter 5494. Deal with it. Sir JoJo waved his hand dispiritedly. Boring. She had been excited for an entire day and night, thinking that someone would definitely come to cause trouble for the full moon banquet tomorrow. Perhaps she could even meet that mysterious talisman hall master. After all, she had already gone to the star domain to draw many talismans. She had prepared a large number of talismans, just waiting for that mysterious hall master to come today. She wanted to compete with him in talismans. And the result? Cheen Grass, this stinky shrimp, came. She had been excited for nothing the entire night, and was so excited that she almost couldn't sleep. Sir JoJo was so angry that he almost exploded on the spot. Cheen Grass had been digesting the meaning of Arbor's words, and now he finally realized what was going on. This damned woman. She meant that she had been waiting for him here since early in the morning? She had predicted that he would come to steal the child? Impossible. Who was she trying to fool? This woman must be forcing herself to be calm to trick him. Cheen Grass hurriedly grabbed the child in his swaddling clothes and shouted sternly, "Are you really going to ignore your child's life?" Arbor rolled his eyes. He couldn't be bothered to respond to this retard. Could he trouble himself to take a look at the child when he was kidnapping him? The shadow guards had already swarmed forward, and were fighting with the masked men in black. Fortunately, they were in a flat plaza, and there were no obstructions around them, nor were there any plants or flowers blocking the way, so their field of vision was very wide. The battle was about to start and it was in full swing. The shadow guards were serious this time. Just now, in order to cooperate with the little crown princess, they had been giving way to the masked men of the All-Seer. They had purposely revealed a few openings, allowing them to come to this empty plaza. The crown princess had said before that she felt sorry for the flowers and plants in the garden, and didn't want these innocent flowers and plants to be tainted by the All-Seer's stinky blood. So they had been going easy on the All-Seer. It looked like they couldn't beat the All-Seer, but they had been forcing the All-Seer's disciples onto a straight path. When the two sides started fighting, Chenegrass's entire face was dumbfounded. If he still didn't realize that there was something strange about the child in his arms, then he really would be an idiot. He hurriedly lowered his head to open the child's swaddling clothes, and looked inside and almost fainted from anger. How could he be the precious little imperial grandson of the divine land? It was clearly a little black mechanical puppet. Seeing him lower his head to look at it, the little golem grinned at him strangely and said, "Idiot." Chinchao was enraged. He fiercely threw the golem that was wrapped in swaddling clothes onto the ground. Who would have thought that after the golem landed on the ground, it would grow in the wind and evolve to a height of 2 meters in a matter of minutes? With a stiff iron fist, it rushed towards Zithergrass without hesitation. Chenegrass was shocked and hurriedly raised his arms to block. A ferocious hammer fiercely smashed into his arms. Chenegrass could even hear a light "kacha" sound. His arm was almost crippled. It was clear how powerful that mechanical puppet's heavy punch was. Ah! Chenegrass's entire body was sent flying backwards. He did a backflip and landed heavily on the ground. He barely managed to stabilize himself with his hands. He raised his head and looked at Arbor, who was looking at him coldly. His heart trembled and his pupils dilated. Fast, too fast. That little stoic simply didn't wait for him to adjust his breathing and regain his composure. A vine whip that meandered like a fire dragon had already swept in front of him. The vine whip landed heavily on Chenegrass's face, causing him to howl in pain. He immediately rolled on the ground, covering his face as he desperately rolled. TSK, the face slapping actually came so quickly. Chapter 5495. Xiaomu gazed icily at the Zithergrass as she scoffed. "Do you think that this Crown Prince Consort is a fool? That you can do whatever you want with him? There must be something wrong with these people's brains, coming to the Eastern Palace to steal her son. They thought that with so many people coming and going at the full moon banquet today, the Crown Princess would not be able to watch over the child in time and would be able to take the child away. However, they did not know that after discovering that someone had infiltrated the Eastern Palace in disguise, the young couple had already swept through the palace. Within an hour they had caught 4 or 5 Tianyun spies hidden in various parts of the Eastern Palace. It was the Crown Prince's idea to leave behind the wet nurse with evil intentions. It would be too easy to switch his son with Dabao. As long as they waited for Princess Consort Kong and the rest to finish fooling around with their son and leave the warm room, they would let Little Tree drag their son into the Star Domain and let Dabao hide in his swaddling clothes. Then everything would be fine. It was laughable that Chenegrass was such a fool. He had pinched Baby Mo several times but did not realize that it was a little stiff. He had risked his life to come to the Eastern Palace to steal the child, so he was already panicking. How could he still notice so many details? Therefore this was also what Arbor was dissatisfied with. She had already prepared everything and was ready for battle, but in the end the only one who came looking for trouble was Chenegrass. Tianyun did not even send Luohe over. Were they looking down on the little Crown Princess too much? "Arbor, don't think that you have succeeded in scheming against me," Chenegrass berated loudly. He clutched his chest and struggled to stand up. "Let me tell you, don't be so smug." Tianyun, whoosh! The vine whip that was covered in sparkling blue flames suddenly slid in front of Chenegrass. Once again the whip whipped away that fellow's vicious curses that had not yet left his mouth. Chenegrass was sent flying to the ground by the whip. He sprawled on the ground and even his breathing became much weaker. A wisp of fear involuntarily spread across his eyes, like wild grass growing wildly. Why did he feel that this perverted woman's cultivation level seemed to have increased by quite a bit again? During the previous battle the oppressive feeling was not so heavy. Today when he stood face to face with her again, he could only feel the endless pressure coming from her body. It was so heavy that he almost couldn't breathe. Arbor coldly glanced at him. 3 clusters of blue spiritual cleansing flames leaped up from her fingertips, dancing back and forth around her fingers. Chenegrass was shocked. He lay on the ground, motionless. From his soul to the depths of his bones, he was screaming at him, "Run!" He had to escape immediately. Run, run, run. If he didn't escape now, he wouldn't have another chance. Now that his plan had been exposed and he had failed to snatch the child, he had no one to rely on. If he didn't escape now, he might lose his life here today. Slurp. Everyone took a closer look and saw a little mouse crawling out from a pile of clothes and running away in a panic with its tail between its legs. But very quickly, everyone discovered that this pitiful little mouse was bumping into walls everywhere. Taking a closer look, he saw that the little mouse was surrounded by defensive walls. It had nowhere to run. Arbor hooked up the corners of her lips, a trace of cold mockery appearing on her lips. She took a few steps forward and raised her hand with a frown. The blue spiritual cleansing flames turned into an empty palm and grabbed the little mouse's tail from a distance. The vine whip in Arbor's hand ruthlessly lashed at the little mouse. "I told you not to underestimate me." Her whip heavily lashed at the little mouse's body, almost tearing that tattered body of the mouse into two. Chapter 5496. Do you really think I'm that stupid? I let you use the transformation talisman to escape once. Do you think I'll let you escape a second time today? Her eyes coldly stared at Qin Grass without a trace of sympathy. This person had been Qin Hong's lackey for so many years, it was unknown how many people he had killed. What was there to sympathize with? Even if he was as weak as a mouse right now, he didn't deserve any sympathy. Qin Grass didn't think that even after transforming into a mouse, he still couldn't escape from the vicious woman. He let out a miserable scream, but the sound that came out was the squeaking of a mouse. Arbor coldly snorted. She waved her hand to have the wooden vines form a small wooden cage and threw the fool inside. Qin Grass frantically scurried around the cage, but the cage was full of barbs made of wooden thorns. After he frantically jumped around in a panic, he was covered in wounds and there wasn't a single piece of flesh on his body that wasn't injured. Qin Grass, this little mouse, had walked right into the trap. At that time he felt that there was no way for him to live. He collapsed to the ground with his belly sticking out, squeaking for a while. After using the transformation talisman, he wouldn't be able to recover in a short time. Arbor's eyes flashed with a trace of ridicule. With a move of her finger, clusters of blue flames were thrown into the cage, erecting several blue flame walls around the little mouse. The high temperature of the fire spirit made Qin Grass squeak and scurry around, but there was nothing he could do. On the contrary, his originally dirty and dark fur was burned by the blue flames, becoming even more disheveled and disheveled. Arbor saw that this guy was about to be tortured, so she waved her hand and took out a purple talisman. She said to herself, "Let's see what the effects are." This was the newest talisman she had learned from the 11th Jade Slip, Soul-Searching Talisman. As the name implied, its effect was the same as manual soul-searching. Moreover, its greatest advantage was that manual soul-searching could result in something like a soul explosion, causing the soul-searcher to fall into a dangerous situation and suffer a backlash from the soul explosion. Soul-Searching Talisman was different. If the other party wanted to explode their soul, they would be suppressed by the Soul-Searching Talisman. In the end, it would be very painful and their soul would scatter. With this kind of soul-searching talisman, there was no need to be afraid of being tricked again. Arbor happily threw out the soul-searching talisman. So what if the other party turned into a rat? In essence, his spirit was still that of a zither herb. As the soul-searching talisman took effect, the rats in the cage let out a series of shrill screams. At the same time, Arbor could selectively receive all the information from the other party's consciousness. Leaving aside some useless information was the important information about the heavenly fate. The soul-searching process lasted for the time it took for an incense stick to burn. As for Qin Chao, that pitiful smelly rat, it was now lying in the small cage on the verge of death and gradually stopped moving. Obviously, Zither Grass's divine sense couldn't withstand the pressure of the soul-searching talisman. He was completely finished. Arbor tossed a torch over and burned it to ashes. Only then did he turn to look at the Eastern Palace shadow guards, who were slowly coming to a stop. More than half of the hundreds of Heavenly Fate disciples that Qin Chao had brought in with his spatial spiritual abode were dead or injured. The rest were surrounded by the shadow guards and forced to kneel on the ground with swords and knives at their necks. Arbor's cold gaze swept over them. He raised his hand and waved. The shadow guards immediately retreated with the remaining Heavenly Fate disciples. Arbor stomped back to Emolien's side. Chapter 5497. She raised her small head and was about to speak to him. Suddenly she felt a gust of wind blow past her, and a soul immediately floated over from the side. The little stoic turned her head to take a look. She saw the dull-witted Mo with his long hair hanging loosely over his shoulders suddenly appear beside her. Arbor found it a bit strange that this guy had suddenly appeared after facing the wall and pondering over his wrongdoings for so many days. Why are you? Arbor glanced at her speechlessly and raised his hand to hold this wispy soul. It couldn't be that she had gone too far with her acting just now and alarmed Emo? Arbor reflexively covered his face. Cough, her acting just now was indeed a bit fake. Friends. She reached out to pacify the dull-witted Emo. But don't listen to my mournful cries just now. I was actually just fooling around with them. I'm really fine. She tugged on that soul and turned around to walk a few steps before abruptly turning her head back. At the same time, Emolien and Yasi also sensed an unusual fluctuation in the air abruptly emerge at the first instant. However, Arbor felt it more directly than the two of them. Because this hidden talisman had suddenly activated at this moment, and the surging talisman energy hidden within it could be considered the first time she had seen such a thing in her life. A life-affirming talisman. It was actually a saint-rank life-affirming talisman. The little stoic's pupils contracted and disbelief flitted through her eyes. As expected, there was always someone better than you. Could it be that there was still a saint-rank great talisman practitioner in this world? She didn't have time to think too much because the life-affirming talisman pounced at her once it activated. The golden light of the talisman abruptly enveloped her. The two strands of sacred energy that Emolien and Yasi sent over were actually blocked by the light of the talisman and couldn't rush in for the time being. Emolien immediately panicked and flashed in front of Arbor with a leap. She swung her sword at the light of the talisman from a distance. With a swish, a crack as wide as a person was instantly cut open in the light of the talisman that resembled a barrier. In the blink of an eye, before Xiaomu could react, she felt a huge force abruptly pushing her from behind. This force was extremely formidable, and it instantly blasted away the wisp of talisman energy that came straight at her. Then, it suddenly pushed her out of the gap and into her husband's arms. Emolien hurriedly reached out to hold her waist. Only when he truly hugged his wife did his wildly beating heart suddenly relax a little. Arbor abruptly turned around, his pupils constricting slightly. Under the light of the life-severing rune, Mo's figure appeared somewhat blurry. Yes, after the death charm took effect, it would definitely capture its target, Arbor. But now Arbor had been pushed out by Emo. Emo didn't even have the time to change the target of Arbor's death talisman. He could only deal with Emo, who was enveloped by the light of the talisman. Xiaomu was startled and she shouted, Emo, along with Emolien Yasi and He Chen and the others who flew out of the star field, they all rushed over together. Countless bursts of sacred energy suddenly struck the outer layer of the light of the talisman. Xiaomu had even flung out her vine whip, wanting to yank Emo out the moment the opening opened. However, Emo was right in front of her eyes. She looked like snowflakes that were falling off her soul body. The light and shadow shattered. She had simply disappeared too quickly. Arbor saw her turn around and smile at him. The smile between her brows was gentle. Arbor flew over and reached out to hug her. This person turned into pieces in front of her eyes and disappeared without a trace. No. She couldn't accept it. Chapter 5498. She disappeared so quickly that Jojo didn't even have time to take a closer look at her. Although her eyes were clear before she disappeared, Jojo could still hear her soft voice. Don't worry, Jojo, my primary soul is summoning me. I'll be fine, I'm only leaving temporarily. We'll meet again, Jojo, but Jojo really couldn't accept it emotionally. Arbor knew that this fellow would leave sooner or later. She would definitely follow her primary soul and follow the sun and moon wheels. But it wasn't today, it definitely wasn't today. They didn't even have time to properly bid farewell or have a meal together. They hadn't even discussed whether the little monkey would leave with her or stay here. She disappeared before her eyes just like that, disappearing without a trace. She couldn't catch her even if she wanted to. Her rationality kept telling her that Mo's soul was so powerful, so she would definitely be fine. But emotionally, Jojo really couldn't accept it. She couldn't accept that this slow-witted fellow disappeared before her eyes. Disappeared. Damn liar. Arbor suddenly chased after her, inexplicably wanting to follow the dissipating talisman energy and retrieve her scattered soul. That's right, retrieve it, retrieve it. He could retrieve it. Jojo. Emolien hastily dashed forward and hugged her waist. When she looked down at the little stoic's expression, she instantly panicked. The little stoic's entire body was ice cold, and even her palms were sweating. He hastily covered her and shouted anxiously, Jojo, Jojo. Calm down first and listen to me. She's a liar. Xiaomu shrieked. Her beady black eyes bulged as she stared fixedly at Emolien, stubbornly holding back the tears that filled her eyes. Who asked her to save me? That life-affirming curse was directed at me. I have the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron protecting me, so the life-affirming curse can't kill me. Why did she have to push me out? What right does she have to die for me without any hesitation? Damn liar. She even said we would meet again. The next time we meet, she might not even recognize me. She thinks I won't forget? The pill she asked me for is called love severing. Once you start taking it, there's no turning back. Jojo, calm down. Jojo. Emolien was afraid that she would have another inner demon, so she quickly reached out to hug her and comforted her softly. How could he be a liar? Although she's a little slow, she's a woman of her word. After wandering in the void for so long, I finally met a friend like you. You cherish her and she also cherishes you. She definitely won't lie to you. What do you think, Jojo? You lied. If she takes that medicine, it's hard to say if she can recognize me. Even if she does, she might not like me anymore. Emolien looked helpless. Jojo, you know very well. She went to look for the host soul and the sun-moon wheels. As long as she had this sacred tool, her host soul would be safe and sound. You just can't accept the fact that she suddenly left. Yes, this is too sudden. But we know that everyone must have their own path to walk. Emolien lowered his head to look at her while hugging her. She's gone now, but it doesn't mean that she won't come back. Besides, what are you worried about? Jojo is so cute. Even if that dumb girl forgot about you for a while and doesn't like you, you'll always have a way to make her your friend again, right? Xiao Mu drooped her small head, listless. That was the reason, but she still couldn't accept it psychologically. Chapter 5499. At night, the little monkey came back and found out what had happened. He hugged Arbor and cried. After settling the children down to sleep, Xiao Mu instead tossed and turned on the bed, unable to fall asleep no matter what. A raging fire burned in her heart. She sat up on the bed in a flash. Emolien sat up as well. She held her little hand. Jojo can't sleep? How can I sleep when that curse master is scheming against me? This curse master had used a trick. He had sent Qin Xiao and the bunch of brainless people to the Eastern Palace, but he had secretly ordered someone to place a life-ending talisman and activate it remotely. He had not shown himself, but he had forced her into a panic. He had even made Emo abandon half of her soul to save her. She had no choice but to return to her main soul as soon as possible. Arbor clenched her 2 little fists. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. Even I have to be careful when drawing this kind of saint-level life-ending talisman, Arbor said in a low voice. Because a heaven-level curse master and above is needed to activate the talisman. A life for a life. In other words, that mysterious curse master wanted to use this saint-level life-ending talisman to take Jojo's life. He had to sacrifice someone. Sacrifice himself? That was impossible. Thus he had to sacrifice some unlucky curse master. The underworld court guards searched the streets and alleys. They reported that they had found Luohi's corpse in a dark alley. It was bleeding from all 7 orifices. The answer was self-evident. This Master Luo was the unlucky curse master. He had used a life for a life, to drag Arbor down to hell together with him. Unfortunately, the curse master had miscalculated. Arbor was unscathed, but Emo had sacrificed herself for this. Thus, in the end, Arbor had lost this round. Her heart was filled with bone-deep hatred for that curse master. If she didn't kill him, she wouldn't be human. Little ball. The little tree ant knew that she was in a bad mood. After hearing its little master's call, it hurriedly crawled out of the star domain. Dodo ran between the 2 of them and waved its branch. Mistress, what are your orders? Give me the bone-forging pill you mentioned. Emolien was startled and so was Little Tree. He asked blankly, Master, do you want to eat that sage-level bone-forging pill? Yes, no one below the Paragon stage can kill me. I want this bone-forging pill. But, compared to all the bone-forging pills in the past, this one is exceptionally dangerous. Why you also need to break your bones and regenerate them. Master, can you do it? Arbor smacked Chiochio's head in annoyance. Do you think your master can't do it? Chiochio immediately shook its head like a rattle drum. The main bank. Chiochio is just worried that Master Silver might be in danger. The little tray ant obediently took out a shiny golden pill from its tree pocket and handed it to Arbor. Arbor sensed the divine power inside the pill, took a deep breath and reached out 2 fingers to take the pill. She thought for a moment and temporarily put the bone-forging pill into the fragrance pouch at her waist. After a few days of mental preparation, she would be able to take this pill very quickly. She had to quickly overcome the fear in her heart and face the past and the future. The little stoic clenched her fists and turned to look at Emolien, whose eyes were full of worry. Don't worry, Jojo's Lotus. If the other party uses the mirror image spirit locking formation again, your divine sense will be sealed. Emolien said gravely, at that time, you won't even be able to enter the star domain. I won't. I have the condensing light mirror so it can't seal my divine sense. Chapter 5500. Emolien nodded, thinking that was true. His worry receded slightly, but he was still a bit uneasy. Thus, he grasped her hand and muttered, Jojo, are you really going? At noon he even gave Minyasi a torrent of abuse, saying that he wouldn't take the risk. In the end, he immediately changed his mind after a night had passed. Lady Qiao Qiao nodded her head vigorously. After careful consideration, I have decided to make a trip there. Listen to me first. I'll bring people with me. I'll bring Senior Sister and the others. Feng Changqing and the others as well as Rotten Peach Blossom will also be there. My star domain won't be sealed off by the mirror image soul locking formation. At a critical moment, I only need to wave my hand and everyone can come out to help. You lead the Emperor's Shadow Guards to reinforce Duanyu. This time we'll coordinate from the inside and outside. We must annihilate them all. This way we can restore clarity to the world. Besides, the main battlefield is in the kingdom of Qingzhou this time, so it won't affect us. If we don't go this time, are we really going to wait for them to launch a counterattack and fight their way back to Dragonflame City? This way, who knew how many lives would be destroyed? Emolien knew that his wife's words were very reasonable, but he was unwilling to let her go alone. I want to go in with you. Duanyu and Minyasi can coordinate from the outside. Arbor shook his head. I can only be at ease if you stay outside to preside over the overall situation. Emolien sighed and suddenly hugged her tightly. He muttered softly, how can you be so cunning? You clearly know that I can't refuse you at all. The little stoic blinked and pinched his handsome face. She said seriously, don't worry, I'll definitely be more careful and won't fall into that damned curse practitioner's trap again. She just didn't know whether the person who used Luohe to secretly harm her was Master Yi who followed Sir Omega Kotoku or the mysterious Hall Master who never showed himself. No matter who it was, they were probably already dead in Arbor's eyes. Jojo, I believe in you. Emolien cupped her face and said softly, don't let me down. You're not allowed to get hurt, and you're not allowed to have anything happen to you. Okay. Xiao Mu nodded her small head heavily. The two of them didn't sleep for almost the entire night, cuddling and talking for half the night. Early the next morning, Arbor took everyone and bid farewell to Jojo's Lotus. They sat on the Blue Phoenix and flew out of Dragonflame City. When Empress Bai and the Great Emperor arrived, their daughter-in-law was already far away. This infuriated the Emperor and Empress so much that they slapped the table and scolded their son for his carelessness. How could they let the little stoic go to the Qingzhou kingdom alone, where there were mountains of corpses and seas of blood? Arbor sat steadily on the back of the blue Luan, flying in the air neither too fast nor too slow. Her mood was unusually calm for no reason. It was so calm that even she found it strange. Without any ripples, his state of mind was perfect. She even activated a defensive barrier to block out the wind and started drawing talismans out of boredom. Going through the front door was out of the question. Apparently, Duanyu had erected a fort at the entrance of the West Pond in Qingzhou. Every day he had people go up there to curse and yell, forcing Omega Kotoku to come out and fight. Yet the second young master had never paid attention to him all this time. Arbor hurried along while drawing talismans. She could already see the Qingzhou kingdom in the distance. The closer she got to the Qingzhou kingdom, the more she felt that the air was very polluted. The ending was finished, but the author needed to edit it a bit before reading it again, adding something or changing something. The ending would be released starting tomorrow, and it would be updated 6,000 plus times a day. It would probably be finished by the end of the month, so the author could take a break for a few days. After that, we'll enter the side story and scatter flowers in advance. Chapter 5501. Arbor forcefully swept away the billowing black fog drifting in front of her. She took out a porcelain bottle from her sleeve and stuffed 2 pills into her mouth. Then she expressionlessly stared at the city shrouded in dense dark clouds ahead. Ha, the heavenly kismet existed in such a dark, deformed, and perverted nook and cranny. She had prepared many great gifts for them. She wondered if Qin Hong, this old fellow, would be grateful. Qing Wan let out a shrill cry and flapped its wings, charging into a layer of miasma. Arbor only felt her vision darken as she plunged into a place filled with black fog. The little stoic remained expressionless as she sat on Qing Wan's back. If one looked down from above, they would see this little troublemaker holding a fist-sized luminous pearl in one hand while her entire body was enveloped in an eggshell defensive barrier. 3 layers of defensive talisman matrices were set up outside the eggshell, enveloping Qing Wan as well. 1 person and 1 divine bird flew aimlessly along the spreading black fog. Arbor wasn't in a hurry. She took out a roasted corn from her pocket and took a bite before saying aloofly, "Big Green, get ready." If nothing unexpected happened, that Qin Hong should have received the news by now. The little stoic deliberately avoided Duan Yu's group's location and entered through the thick fog from above. The first to receive the news would definitely be the heavenly kismet's higher-ups. If it wasn't Qin Hong, then it would be the Omega Kotoku. Didn't that Omega Kotoku tell her to come alone? They must have prepared their men early in the morning and arranged a place to wait for her to arrive. Right now, she brazenly entered Qingzhou's territory and landed at the West Pond's entrance in a very high-profile manner. When she turned her head, she saw 5 to 6 zombies wandering around in a daze. They turned their heads with difficulty and met her eyes. Qing Wan transformed into a human and eagerly followed behind her. "Master, should we kill them?" Several whooshing sounds could be heard in the air. His little master had already started attacking without another word. The crow repeating crossbow in her hand shot out several crow gold arrows, directly piercing through those zombies' heads and causing them to fall to the ground in disarray. Arbor gracefully put away the crow repeating crossbow and moved his fingers. A surge of energy pulled the numerous black gold arrows into the air. They circled around in the air and returned to her side. Arbor leisurely released a wisp of water spirit, cleansing the few black gold arrows, then took them back. His eyes flickered as he glanced at a spot not far away. She heard a flurry of footsteps approaching, and a graceful and gorgeous red figure slowly walked up to Xiao Mu while leading a group of more than 100 men in black armor. She gazed at Xiao Mu indifferently. "Crown Princess, you've come from afar. Please excuse me for not going out to meet you." This Miss Zhao Qiran could be considered an old acquaintance of hers. When she was on Seekong Planet, she had been lurking in the Jade Hue brothel. It was said that she had always been in contact with Qin de Omega Kotoku's son. She was a talented woman who sold her skills but not her body. The little crown princess and this person had not interacted much before. Even if they had met a few times, they had only sized each other up and had never really exchanged more than a few words. Now that she saw Zhao Qiran, Arbor was not too surprised. "Where's Qin Hong? Tell him to scram out here." Arbor glanced disdainfully at the group of brawny men in black armor, and a trace of mockery curled at the corners of her mouth. "These little weaklings are not my match. It's best to have Qin Hong invite out that hidden charm master of his to come out." She liked to settle them all quickly so that these people would not jump out one by one and be troublesome. Chapter 5502. Zhao Qiran chuckled and said indifferently, "Crown Princess sure knows how to joke. Crown Prince Consort, please make a trip with Rand first." Zhao Qiran gestured for her to leave. Arbor glanced at her and suddenly threw 3 spiritual energy balls in her direction and shouted, "Explode." Then with a swish he quickly grabbed Qing Wan and turned around to run. The poor Qing Wan, who was eager to fight, was caught off guard by the little Master Silver and almost slipped to the ground. The corners of her mouth twitched as she ran. The sound of the spiritual energy balls exploding reverberated in the air of the West Pond and instantly attracted the attention of everyone around the base. Quite a number of people rushed over. When Xiao Mu saw that someone was coming, she didn't hesitate to throw a spiritual energy ball and explode it. Along the way he threw more than 100 spiritual energy balls, blowing up the West Pond into a mess. It was a horrible sight to behold. Broken fences and broken walls were in ruins. When Qin Hong received the news and rushed over, he was so angry that his old face turned green. Fuck, he had seen arrogant people, but he had never seen such an arrogant and despotic person. She broke into their Tianyun headquarters alone and used spiritual energy balls to destroy everything. Fuck. He wanted to see how many spiritual energy balls she had for her to smash all the way. Qin Hong didn't understand Jojo at all if he thought so. To Si Qiao, these spiritual energy balls were actually not of much use. The lowest level of spiritual energy balls she had stored was the divine energy ball. The spiritual energy balls were collected along the way when she was in the lower star region of the middle 6 prefectures. Normally it was useless to keep it, but now it was useful to use it to blow up the zombies that were slow and not strong enough. Qin Hong led old steward Luo and the others to chase after her. His face was slightly distorted as he raised his finger and pointed forward. Quick! Take advantage of the fact that eldest brother and second brother haven't reacted yet and get rid of this disaster for me. It was really a case of wearing out iron shoes in a fruitless search, only to find it by chance. He was still thinking about how to get rid of this damn facial paralysis and help eldest brother and second brother break free from this damn inner demon. In the end, this bitch barged in on her own. No matter what her purpose was, she had to die here today. Arbor pulled Qing Wan and ran for a while, blowing up the walls in front of them along the way, causing destruction. The two of them crawled out from a pile of dust, coughing and fanning the dust in front of them. Taking a closer look, they realized that their escape had led them straight to the farm. This was not a chicken, duck, or fish farm. What appeared in front of them was a wide pond. There were hundreds and thousands of half-naked undead hags soaking in the pool of special medicine. When they heard the sound, they all opened their eyes and looked in their direction. Qing Wan was shocked. He raised his hand and threw out the last spiritual power ball in his hand. It landed right in the center of the pool. After a muffled explosion, the originally silent zombies suddenly seemed to have been revived. One by one they struggled in the boiling pool and crawled to the shore. Run! Arbor pulled Qing Wan, and the two of them rushed over the edge of the pool. While running, he hurriedly took out 2 1-meter-long rods from his inner world and stuffed one into Qing Wan's hand. The two of them swept the rods back and forth, directly knocking the dozens of zombies that crawled to the shore back into the pool. The sound of water splashing could be heard as the master and servant duo made their way over. Chapter 5503. Xiao Mu turned around and dug out 3 divine energy balls from her pocket, tossing them into the pool with all her might. The power of this explosion was different from the small spiritual power ball from before. The explosion of the divine power balls directly blew up 1/3 of the corpse puppets in the pool. Arbor looked back at the crystal cores that had rolled all over the ground. She struggled but finally gave up. She didn't run back to pick them up and hurriedly left with Qing Wan. She had to be willing to give up to get something. Jojo muttered in her heart as she ran all the way to the gate that connected the West Pond to the main city. There were already hundreds of disciples of the Heavenly Fate sect waiting for her. Seeing her appear, one of them hurriedly screamed, "Quick, quick, the Lord has ordered us to stop this woman. Regardless of life or death, take her down first." At his command, everyone surged forward. Countless streams of divine energy and spiritual energy simultaneously converged in Xiao Mu's direction, forming a brilliant purple and crimson light. Arbor looked at them expressionlessly. With a wave of her hand, the Tianji treasure painting suddenly flew out of her consciousness. This Tianji treasure painting had been improved by her husband. The original divine weapon had been refined by her husband and was almost perfect as a divine weapon. When the 12th layer of the Tianji treasure painting was opened and the hidden weapons were released, this group of pitiful people above the spiritual realm in front of her simply became living targets. In an instant, thousands of gravel flew together and wiped away their vitality. Arbor didn't stop. She immediately ran to the city gate and threw a flying talisman to Qing Wan. There was no need for Qing Wan to transform again. The two directly used the flying talisman and jumped over the city gate that was thousands of feet high. The main city of the Qingzhou Kingdom was actually only a few hundred miles away from the West Pond, East Mountain, and other places. They could reach it in half a cup of tea's time with nimble legs. The entire Qingzhou Kingdom was about the same size as Dragon Flame City, but this Qingzhou Kingdom had always considered itself a kingdom. If the Heavenly Fate sect hadn't used them as a base, the Qingzhou Kingdom would have always existed at the border of the Tsang Prefecture. Although the Qingzhou Kingdom couldn't offend any of the Tsang Prefecture, it had always been famous for its wine. Qingzhou's wine was famous far and wide, and it was also a special tribute offered to the 3 prefectures every year. It was also because of this that their Qingzhou country, from the country king to the citizens, were all cautious. They never thought that one day their peaceful life would be disrupted in an instant. This peaceful country would be chosen by the upper echelons of the Heavenly Fate Organization and would be used to create zombies for the Heavenly Fate Organization to secretly plot a rebellion. Now, the entire Qing state, from top to bottom, had become the experimental base of Tianyun. Arbor turned around and looked at the city gate that was high up in the clouds. His eyes were dark and gloomy. Open the city gates. Stop her with all your might, don't let her run into the inner city of the main city. Qin Hong's exasperated voice came from outside the city gate. Qin Hong's speed was not slow either. At the same time, the city gate creaked, and the two towering iron gates were pulled open from the inside. Arbor turned around and saw the old man, Qin Hong, stepping on a plank-shaped flying spirit tool and crossing the city gate. His old face was tense as he chased after them. Qing Yuan turned around and shouted, "Watch the ball." She raised her right hand and prepared to attack. Qin Hong hurriedly stretched out his arms to block in front of his eyes, and his whole body was covered with a layer of defensive spiritual aura. He was ready to be bombarded by the spiritual energy ball, but when he looked up, Chapter 5504. He saw the little stoic grabbing Qing Yuan and running away at lightning speed, and the two of them bounced over 1,000 meters away in an instant. The old man was so angry that his face turned green and white. He roared, "Chase after them. Go seal the main city district's central gate. Don't let the news in. Don't let those two rascals know that this disaster has come in. If those two rascals knew that this jinx had come, they would definitely run to find her at the first opportunity. If they saw that she was chasing Arbor with so many people, perhaps they wouldn't even be father and son anymore. What a headache." Second brother was also in the city today. If he knew, Qin Hong's head felt like it was about to split open. Run. Arbor waved her arm forcefully. Qing Yuan, who was running at lightning speed beside her, couldn't help but twitch her mouth. She asked quietly, "Master, why don't we fly?" What was there to fly about? The effect of running was what he wanted. Run, run, run. Sir Jojo's little stoic face was taut as she expressionlessly called out several times. Qing Yuan's mouth twitched. Although she didn't understand what Little Master was doing, she inexplicably felt that Little Master was very, very powerful. She just had to run with her. Arbor ran at lightning speed around the central city, and Qin Hong led a group of Heavenly Fate black-armored soldiers to follow closely behind. Following them were large batches of emotionless zombies. There were no less than 4,000 to 5,000 of them. The black mass followed Qin Hong and chased after Arbor from all directions, running back and forth inside the central city. When Arbor saw that it was about time, she called for Qing Yuan to quickly transform and leaped onto Qing Yuan's back. Qin Hong was furious and roared at the sky. "Damn girl, do you think you can still escape from here alive today? Archers, get ready." On the city gate towers, inside the dilapidated pavilions, as long as it was high ground, hundreds and thousands of heads popped out in unison. With a whoosh, they aimed their bows at Qing Yuan and Arbor. At the same time, Arbor stood on Qing Yuan's back and looked down at the common people with apathetic eyes. Her voice was icy and heartless to the extreme. "Since this crown princess has come today, in that case, before all of you die, I have no intention of leaving." With a wave of her hand, a pure black pearl rose from her palm. Qin Hong's eyelids suddenly twitched, and a bad premonition arose spontaneously. The moment the Heart of Misfortune was activated, a heavy pressure instantly enveloped everyone below. Aside from the Qin Huan, who was still able to hold on, all the other disciples of the Heavenly Fate sect were bound by the oppressive force. They struggled and twisted their bodies in fear. The disciples of the Heavenly Fate sect who hadn't completely mutated and were still conscious immediately tried to escape this control. However, there was no way to escape. Once the Heart of Misfortune was activated, everything around it would be absorbed by it, except for its own master. Qin Hong suddenly stretched out his hand and summoned a huge black eagle. This giant eagle had a slender neck, a fist-sized head, 8 pairs of wings and 4 pairs of hooked claws. As soon as it appeared, it blocked out all the light in the area. With a light flap of his wings, a violent gust of wind rose and quickly swept towards Arbor's side. However, what made Qin Hong depressed was that in the next second, he saw that the gust of wind caused by the harpy was directly absorbed by the Heart of Misfortune. It was absorbed. It didn't fall on Arbor at all. It was completely absorbed by the Heart of Misfortune. Chapter 5505. Immediately after, all the disciples of the Heavenly Fate sect who were enveloped by the light of misfortune below also began to be sucked into the realm of misfortune one by one. Arbor stood on Blue Phoenix's back and watched coldly as everyone screamed and screamed miserably as they were sucked into the realm of misfortune. Her expression was cold and unchanging. There was not the slightest fluctuation in her heart, as if what she saw was not a tragic scene in the human world. The fate of the disciples of the Heavenly Fate sect who were sucked into the realm of misfortune was not something she cared about. Until all the corpse puppets present, as well as the disciples of the Heavenly Fate sect, were sucked into the realm of misfortune. Arbor then frowned and looked at the giant harpy who was flapping its wings vigorously to create a gust of wind. Her gaze slowly fell on Qin Hong. The realm of misfortune absorbed thousands of corpse puppets and disciples of the Heavenly Fate sect, and now it was in a saturated state. It probably could not absorb anything in the short term. Unless her divine perception once again made a qualitative leap. Or perhaps the last soul fragment was recovered. Arbor frowned and waved her hand to put away the heart of misfortune. She stared coldly at Qin Hong's pale old face. Damn it. Qin Hong clutched his chest. His face was pale as a sheet. The little stoic in front of him was really infuriating. She was simply. She cheated. This fellow threw out a natural mystic realm's heart as soon as she came up and sucked in all the corpse puppets of the Heavenly Fate sect. Now they really did not even need to fight. Qin Hong looked up and saw that there was not a single person in sight. He could not help but feel angry. Even the large number of archers he arranged were sucked in by the heart of misfortune. Arbor just casually used a mystic realm's heart to absorb 1/10 of their Heavenly Fate sect's power. Seeing her put away the mystic realm's heart, Qin Hong breathed a sigh of relief. This fellow did not continue to absorb it. It was definitely not because of her rotten kindness. It must be because the mystic realm's heart had to first digest all the things it sucked in. Damn it. Thinking of this, Qin Hong's old face instantly turned green. He suddenly raised his arm and shouted, "Mirror image god-locking array." Following his shout, black figures darted out from the corners one after another. They held ancient bronze mirrors in their hands as they swiftly shone them in Xiaomu's direction. Various lights and shadows connected into a line and instantly intertwined, neatly forming a grid-like defense line, forming the mirror image god-locking array. Arbor glanced at it. Since she was already prepared, she naturally could not be locked. She activated her divine perception. Little ball. Master Silver Master. Master, don't panic. We have the light-condensing mirror in our hands. No one can lock Master's consciousness. Arbor nodded in satisfaction, but a cracked and panicked expression suddenly appeared on her stoic little face. She exclaimed, "Qin Hong, you despicable person. You used this shady mirror image god-locking array on this crown princess again. Do you think you can get away with it? I advise you not to be too smug." Qin Hong felt an inexplicable headache when he heard her yell a long sentence. When he saw her slightly panicked expression, a trace of smugness inevitably rose in his heart. Ah, damn stoic face. Even you have a day like this. I'm telling you. Once the mirror image god-locking array is activated, there's no way it can't lock you up. Chapter 5506. Ah. Are you panicking now? Do you feel like you can't use your divine sense? How does it feel to not be able to open your inner world? How does it feel to not be able to use the divine artifact hidden in your conscious? Ah. Qin Hong guffawed and swept a disdainful glance at Arbor. If you kneel down and kowtow now and admit your mistake, I can still leave you with an intact corpse. He had to avenge his great enmity. It was all his fault for not being prepared in time and not activating this mirror image spirit locking formation at the first moment. He wasted so much time talking nonsense with this little stoic and ended up losing 1/10 of his disciples and grand-disciples. He really hated him to death. Hand over the heart of the mystic realm just now, Qin Hong said coldly. Perhaps I can still consider sparing your life. Of course that was impossible. As soon as he thought of this demoness who caused his 2 sons to become mentally unstable, Qin Hong's heart burned with rage. He wished he could slap this woman to death right now. He was only fooling her. A cold light flickered in Qin Hong's eyes. Arbor was possessed by a drama queen again, but this time she learned from her previous exaggerated performance and pretended to work very hard to use her divine sense. She whispered in a panic, divine sense? You damn old man, you clearly know that my conscience is locked and you still want me to hand over the heart of misfortune? Are you sick?" Qin Hong was taken aback and was instantly vexed. That's right, that damn stoic took back the heart of the mystic realm just now. It must have been stored in his inner world or his portable spirit domain. Yes, it was said that this damn stoic had a portable spirit domain on him. It was really too tempting. Unfortunately, she had to die here today. Otherwise perhaps he could throw her into a laboratory and study her to see if he could extract her portable spirit domain in the heart of the mystic realm. Thinking of this, Qin Hong quickly rejected this idea in his heart. With how protective his two sons were of her, no, he couldn't let her live. It was even more impossible to turn her into a living experimental subject. Otherwise, those two troublesome little bastards might come knocking on his door to make trouble before the experiment even started. If this matter were to reach the ancestors' ears, then everything that had happened before would be impossible to suppress. Arbor couldn't help but blink when he saw Zhang Heng's sullen face. He asked curiously, "Why aren't you saying anything?" Qin Mu's eyes coldly swept over her. "Stupid girl, you're already at death's door, yet you still have the leisure to ask about other people's matters." Charles, who was possessed by the drama queen, suddenly screamed, "You old thing, you dare to kill me? You've got guts. You're just a cripple whose divine sense has been sealed. You only have a cultivation base, yet you dare to clamor in front of this old man? This old man only needs to press down with his spirit, and you won't be able to withstand it. Don't you want the heart of Arcana?" Of course Qin Hong wanted it. He also wanted to release the disciples and grand-disciples that had been absorbed by this dead-faced stoic. Qin Hong's eyelids twitched slightly, but his expression did not change. "You have a way." Arbor nodded and hooked his finger at him. "Why don't you come closer? I'll tell you." Qin Hong glanced at her defensively. Yet he saw the little stoic expressionlessly cast him a disdainful look. "What? You don't even dare to approach someone whose divine sense has been sealed? It turns out this crown princess's accumulated power is this great. Bullshit." Qin Mu was so angry that he couldn't stop swearing. This dead-faced crown princess was truly infuriating. He hadn't even spoken 3 sentences with her, yet he felt his blood pressure suddenly shoot up. Chapter 5507. Then come, Arbor's eyes were scornful as he hooked his finger at him again. Qin Hong hesitated, but he still couldn't resist the temptation of the heart of the mystic realm. He hesitantly walked forward a few steps and slowly approached Arbor's side. "What exactly do you have to say? Don't give me that nonsense. I'm telling you, don't even think about stalling for time. This kind of trick is useless against this old man." Arbor cast a sidelong glance at Qin Hong with a cold little stoic face. In the blink of an eye, he pretended to take out a storage talisman and pretended to take out a thunderclap. The third move of the 9 Heavens lightning sword art, 10,000 swords returned to origin. In a split second, it drew upon the power of the lightning spirit between heaven and earth, and a huge sword blotted out the sky. There was a sizzling sound of thunder and lightning. Qin Hong stared in shock at the huge illusory sword hanging high in the air. With lightning speed it chopped down towards his head. Qin Hong hastily activated several defensive devices. But he heard a series of loud clangs. Within minutes, several defensive barriers were split open by the thunderclap sword. An unstoppable, earth-shattering power of the lightning spirit soared from the sky and smashed down with a bang. Qin Hong was horrified and furious, and he hastily formed a partial godly armor over his head to block it. Unfortunately, this godly armor could only defend against ordinary power, but what he was facing now was the little stoic drawing upon the power of the lightning spirit that existed between heaven and earth. 2 clicks were heard. The little stoic's thunderclap sword immediately slashed open 2 slashes on the godly armor, and even the back of his shoulder blade was cut open. At the same time, this stoic face was especially deceitful and directly sprinkled a handful of unknown poisonous powder. With a whoosh, the white powder rippled in the air. Qin Hong had already sealed off his 5 senses at once, but this damn white powder seemed to have eyes and directly came into contact with his wounds, burrowing into them. Qin Hong was thoroughly shocked. His old face instantly turned purple, and a bad premonition grew wildly in his heart. He turned his head and touched the wound on his shoulder blade. "Arbor, you actually used poison? Could this little stoic's methods be any more vicious and shameless?" The fight was going well, but she suddenly scattered a handful of poison powder. She was simply despicable and shameless. Arbor was too lazy to pay attention to this person. Seeing that the poison powder had taken effect, he grabbed Thunder Flash, turned around and hacked at him from top to bottom. The giant harpy on the other side saw this and wanted to swoop down from mid-air. However, it was blocked by the divine bird Qing Wan and they started fighting on the spot. Arbor held Thunder Flash in his hand as he chased after Qin Hong and hacked at him expressionlessly. Qin Hong hurriedly fled in the direction of the center gate. He clenched his teeth and wanted to slip away first. At this moment he did not know what kind of ghost poison he had been poisoned with. The situation at the scene was extremely unfavorable for him. He could not stay any longer. Qin Hong didn't know if it was his own mind playing tricks on him, but at this moment he felt that the injury on his shoulder blade seemed to be painful, numb, and itchy. It was extremely uncomfortable. He was so angry that his head spasmed. He leaped up, wanting to speed up and leave. However, he had only leaped up a few meters when he felt his head become heavy and his feet become light. His entire mind was in a daze as he fell from the sky. He crashed heavily onto the ground with a bang. He lifted his eyes, trying his best to glance at the little stoic, but he discovered that everything before him was a blur. In the end, that giant harpy did not have many human thoughts and did not know how to turn around and rescue his master. He didn't even look at Qin Hong and was teased by Qing Wan. Chapter 5508. This guy went all the way to the southwest, following Qing Wan as he fought and ran. In a short while he was far away. Qin Hong cursed this harpy's ancestors in his heart. No matter how he roared, the harpy had already run away with Qing Wan. Naturally, he would not pay attention to Qin Hong's roar. In just an instant, Qin Hong felt that his whole person was very unwell. This poison was very powerful. It might corrode the nerves. Now in just a moment he only felt numb, itchy, sore and painful all over. He lay on the ground and groaned in a low voice. Suddenly he felt a spiritual sword aura fall along his left arm. Qin Hong wanted to block it, but at this time he could not even form the divine armor. Qin Hong was shocked. The tearing pain in his arm made him sit up straight reflexively. Ah! The sound of his left arm being cut off shocked Qin Hong again. A pair of blurry eyes that could not see anything clearly abruptly widened, and a hoarse yell came from his mouth. Xiaomu, what did you do? Arbor, where are you? Come out. You despicable and shameless villain, you actually poisoned me. Arbor looked at Qin Hong with some surprise. He took out a handful of white powder from his pocket and directly sprinkled it down. So you're not a transcendent god. Her poison powder had no effect on people above the mystique venerable realm. So this Qin Hong looked powerful, but in fact he was just a paper tiger. He had not even broken through the mystique venerable realm. Or he had just broken through the transcendent god realm on the surface. In fact, the real cultivation inside was fake? Well, Tianyun habitually used drugs to make people look strange. It was not impossible to develop a batch of drugs that could quickly make one reach the transcendent god realm. Arbor sighed and shook his head. You jump up and down thinking about killing me all day long. Have you ever thought that this day would come? Arbor, don't be so proud, you're just lucky. Before Qin Hong could finish his sentence, he felt a sharp sword aura cut down his neck. Although he could not see, he was not stupid. When he felt the strong wind coming, he quickly rolled on the ground. He rolled to the side with an unsightly expression on his face. His left arm was bleeding profusely. Who would have thought that this vicious and merciless brat would chop off someone's head before they could even finish a conversation? Could it be that she didn't want to know who the higher-ups of the Heavenly Fate organization were? Didn't she want to hear the story behind the Heavenly Fate organization? How could this stoic face be so impatient? Xiao Mu expressionlessly glanced at him before raising her sword and charging forward without another word. Since he knew that the person in front of him was just pretending to be a transcendent god, Arbor's lips curled into a mocking smile. His cold eyes flashed slightly, and he arrived in front of Qin Hong. At the same time, the group of black-clothed men holding the bronze mirrors were almost stunned by the audacity of the little crown princess. This person didn't even say a word before he tried to kill their master. Shouldn't the usual routine be to first catch the person and then ask him about the whole story? However, the little stoic had a different routine. She couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with Qin Hong. In any case, they had already come to this point. It was already an irreconcilable feud, so what was the point of talking nonsense? He sent people to kill her MO, so she killed him and all of them in return. Wasn't this a very normal thing? Could it be that heaven forbade people from fighting back? You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.